In the sleepy village of King's Abbot, a single dagger pierces the heart of Roger Ackroyd, unraveling a web of secrets that no one, not even the killer, can escape. Who moved the chair in the locked study? What truth lies in the singed letter? And why does Dr. James Shepherd, our trusted narrator, seem to hide more than he reveals? Join Hercule Poirot in a chilling game of cat and mouse, where every whisper could be a lie, and the shocking truth will leave you stunned. Hercule Poirot, Narrator Nightmare, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Dare you uncover the twist? Chapter 1. Whispers in King's Abbot. The village of King's Abbot dozed under the weight of an autumnal haze. Its cobbled lanes and ivy-clad cottages bathed in the amber glow of a late September sun. To an outsider, it might have seemed a postcard of English serenity, chimneys puffing lazy curls of smoke, the church spire piercing a sky of deepening blue, and the distant bleat of sheep grazing beyond the hedgerows. But beneath this tranquil veneer, a restless undercurrent stirred, like a breeze rustling leaves before a storm. I, Dr. James Shepherd, knew this better than most. As the village's physician, I was privy to its pulse, its secrets whispered in hushed tones. Behind lace curtains or over chipped teacups at the Three Boars Inn, King's Abbot was a place where everyone knew everyone else's business or thought they did. It was a Tuesday, unremarkable save for the chill that clung to the morning air, when the village awoke to a scandal that would set tongues wagging for weeks. Mrs. Ferrers, the widow of Fernley Park's late squire, had been found dead in her bed, a vial of veronal beside her. Suicide, the coroner declared with brisk efficiency, and the village accepted the verdict with a collective nod, as if death by one's own hand were as commonplace as a Sunday sermon. But I, who had attended her in her final months, knew better. There was something in the way her eyes had darted during our last consultation, a flicker of fear behind her polished composure, that told me her story was far from simple. I sat at my breakfast table, the aroma of toast and strong tea mingling with the damp scent of morning dew seeping through the open window. My sister, Caroline, presided over the meal with her usual air of command, her sharp eyes missing nothing. At 45, she was a spinster by choice, her life devoted to the twin pursuits of village gossip and the management of our modest household. Her hair, once a vibrant auburn, was now streaked with grey, pulled into a severe bun that mirrored her no-nonsense demeanour. Yet her mind was a steel trap, catching every rumour that drifted through King's Abbot's lanes. "James," she said, her voice cutting through the clink of china, "you must know more than you're letting on about Mrs. Ferrers. The woman was healthy as a horse last I saw her at the church bazaar. Suicide, theft, there's more to it, mark my words." I spread marmalade on my toast with deliberate care, avoiding her gaze. "Caroline, you see conspiracies in every shadow." She was unwell, that's all. Veronal can be dangerous in excess. Unwell, my foot. Caroline's teaspoon clattered against her saucer. She was terrified. "James, I saw it in her face when she bought those scones from Mrs. Gannett. And don't tell me it was indigestion. A woman like that, with money and a fine house, doesn't just swallow poison on a whim." I sighed, knowing resistance was futile. Caroline's network of informants, maids, shopkeepers, even the postman's wife, fed her a steady diet of half-truths and speculation, which she wove into narratives as intricate as the lace doilies under her teapot. "Perhaps she had debts," I offered, hoping to steer her away from dangerous waters, or a broken heart. "Widows can be lonely." Caroline snorted. "Debts, with Roger Ackroyd footing her bills. Don't play the fool, James. Everyone knows he was sweet on her. Why, just last week, Mrs. Gannett saw them walking arm in arm by the lake, thick as thieves." I pushed my plate away, appetite waning. Roger Ackroyd, the wealthiest man in King's Abbot, was indeed a figure of fascination. His estate, Fernley Park, loomed at the village's edge, a sprawling manor of red brick and secrets. A widower himself, Ackroyd had taken a keen interest in Mrs. Ferrers since her husband's death a year prior, a death that too had sparked whispers of foul play, though none dared voice them aloud. Ackroyd's generosity was legendary, but so was his temper, and I wondered, not for the first time, what lay behind his jovial facade. "Caroline," I said, rising from the table, "I have patience to see. Let Mrs. Ferrers rest in peace. The coroner's report is final." She fixed me with a stare that could curdle milk. "You're hiding something, James Shepherd. I'll find out what, sooner or later." I escaped to my surgery, a small room, At the front of our cottage, its walls lined with medical texts, and the faint scent of antiseptic, my morning was a blur of coughs, sprains, and the usual hypochondria of King's Abbot's residence. Old Mr. Hammond fretted over his rheumatism, while young Elsie Turner blushed through a consultation about a persistent rash, but my thoughts kept drifting to Mrs. Ferris, her pale hands clutching the arms of my consulting chair, her voice low as she spoke of sleepless nights and a weight she could not name. I had prescribed Verono sparingly, but she had insisted, and I, fool that I was, had relented. By noon, the surgery was empty, and I stepped outside to clear my head. The village square bustled with its usual rhythm carts, clattering over cobblestones, children chasing a stray dog, and Mrs. Gannett sweeping her shop's doorstep while exchanging tidbits with a neighbor. I nodded to her, my smile practiced, and made my way toward the edge of the village, where a low stone wall separated my garden from that of my new neighbor. He was an oddity, this newcomer, who had arrived in King's Abbot a month prior with little fanfare. The villagers called him Mr. Poirot, a retired hairdresser from London, or so he claimed. His cottage was a riot of colour, its garden bursting with vegetable marrows that he tended with an almost religious zeal. I had glimpsed him only once before, a small man with a waxed moustache and an air of fastidiousness that bordered on absurdity. As I approached, I saw him kneeling among his marrows, a straw hat perched at a jaunty angle. "Good day, doctor," he called, his voice carrying a faint accent I couldn't place. "Your roses are splendid, but they lack discipline. A little pruning, perhaps," I chuckled, leaning against the wall. "They manage well enough, without my interference. You're quite the gardener, Mr. Poirot." He stood, brushing soil from his immaculate trousers, and fixed me with a pair of piercing green eyes. "It is not Poirot, doctor, but Poirot. And these marrows, they are my solace in retirement. One must have order, even in vegetables." No. His name tugged at some distant memory, but I dismissed it. "Retirement suits you, then. King's Abbot is a quiet place for it." "Quiet." His mustache twitched, as if amused. "Yet I hear whispers of a tragedy. A lady, Mrs. Ferris." "Yes. The village speaks of nothing else." I stiffened, caught off guard. "A sad affair. She took too much Verono. It happens." Poirot's eyes narrowed, though his smile remained. "Does it? Curious how such things happen in quiet places. But come, doctor, tell me of King's Abbot. Who are its characters, its dramas?" I hesitated, sensing a trap in his geniality, but obliged with a brief sketch of the village busybodies, its gentry, and Roger Ackroyd, the linchpin of local society. Poirot listened intently, his head tilted like a bird studying a worm. When I mentioned Ackroyd, his eyebrow lifted. A man of influence, this Monsieur Ackroyd, and perhaps of secrets. I laughed, deflecting. "If he has secrets, he keeps them well. You'll meet him at the church social, I'm sure." Poirot nodded, but his gaze lingered, as if peeling back layers I hadn't known I wore. "I look forward to it. Dr. Villet is like a puzzle." "No, and I am fond of puzzles." I returned home, unsettled by the encounter. Caroline was in the parlour, knitting with ferocious speed, her needles clicking like a telegraph. "Who's that foreigner you were chatting with?" she demanded. "Mrs. Gannett says he's peculiar, always muttering to himself." "His name's Poirot," I said, sinking into an armchair. "A retired hairdresser, fond of marrows. Harmless enough, harmless." Caroline's needles paused. "Mark my words, James, there's more to him than meets the eye. And Mrs. Ferrers' death, too. I heard from Elsie that she was seen arguing with Roger Ackroyd last week, near the lake. Something about money." I suppressed a groan. "Caroline, you'll turn a sneeze into a murder plot. Let it rest." But rest was not in King's Abbot's nature. By evening, the village was abuzz with fresh gossip. Ralph, Peyton Ackroyd's stepson, had been seen storming out of Fernley Park after a heated row with his stepfather. Ralph, a charming but reckless young man, was a favourite topic at the Three Boars, where pints loosened tongues. I avoided the inn, preferring the solitude of my study, but Caroline's voice carried through the walls, recounting every rumour, with relish. As dusk settled, painting the sky in hues of violet and gold, I settled at my desk to review patient notes. The quiet was shattered by the shrill ring of the telephone. I lifted the receiver, expecting a patient's complaint, but the voice on the other end was low, urgent, and unmistakably Parker, Ackroyd's butler. "Dr. Shepherd, you must come at once. "It's Mr. Ackroyd. He's dead. In his study. Please, hurry." The line went dead. My heart pounded, a cold dread settling in my bones. I grabbed my medical bag and coat, shouting to Caroline that I'd been called to Fernley Park. Her eyes widened, but I was out the door before she could pry further. The walk to Fernley Park was a blur. The crunch of gravel underfoot, drowned by the roar of my thoughts. Roger Ackroyd, dead. It seemed impossible. The man was a force of nature, his laughter filling rooms, his presence commanding respect. Yet Parker's voice had held no trace of doubt. Fernley Park loomed ahead, its windows glowing like watchful eyes. Parker met me at the door, his face ashen, his usual composure frayed. "This way, sir," he stammered, leading me through the grand hall, past portraits of Ackroyd ancestors, to the study door. It was locked, the heavy oak unyielding. "Mr. Ackroyd was in there alone," Parker said, wringing his hands. "I heard him speaking earlier, but when I knocked, there was no answer." "I fear the worst." I nodded, my mind racing. "We'll have to break it down." With a crowbar from the gardener's shed, we forced the door open, the wood splintering, with a sound like a gunshot. The study was dimly lit, a single lamp casting shadows across the mahogany desk. Roger Ackroyd sat in his high-backed chair, his head slumped forward, a silver dagger protruding from his neck. Blood pooled on the carpet, dark and glistening, and his eyes, once so full of life, stared blankly into eternity. I stepped forward, my medical training taking over. No pulse, no breath. Ackroyd was beyond saving. The window stood ajar, a cool breeze stirring the curtains, and muddy footprints led from the sill to the lawn beyond. A letter lay open on the desk, its edges singed as if someone had tried to burn it. I reached for it, but Parker's voice stopped me. "Sir, we mustn't touch anything." "The police, of course," I said, stepping back. "Call them at once." As Parker hurried off, I stood alone with Ackroyd's body, the weight of the moment pressing down. Mrs. Ferrer's death. Now this King's Abbot was unraveling, its secrets spilling like blood. I glanced at the footprints, the dagger, the letter, my mind already piecing together questions I dared not voice. Who had been in this room? Why was the window open? And what had Ackroyd known that cost him his life? The distant wail of a police siren broke my reverie, but it was another sound that chilled me, a soft chuckle from the garden, where a figure stood silhouetted against the moonlight. I squinted, catching a glimpse of a straw hat and a waxed moustache. Hercule Poirot, my peculiar neighbor, was watching, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't name. King's Abbot was no longer a quiet village. It was a stage, and the curtain had just risen on a drama I feared would consume us all. Chapter 2. The locked study. The night air clung to Dr. James Shepherd like a damp shroud as he hurried along the frost-kissed path to Fernley Park. The village of King's Abbot, usually a sleepy cluster of cottages, buzzed with an undercurrent of unease. The phone call had come just past 9:30. A trembling voice. Parker, the butler, stammering that Roger Ackroyd, the wealthiest man in the village, was dead. "Murdered," he'd whispered, as if the word itself might summon calamity. Shepherd's medical bag thumped against his hip, its leather worn from years of house calls, but tonight it felt heavier, as though it carried the weight of the village's collective dread. The iron gates of Fernley Park loomed ahead, their filigree catching the moonlight like skeletal fingers. Shepherd pushed them open, the creak echoing in the stillness. The Georgian manor stood imposingly, its windows glowing amber against the dark. As he approached, the front door swung inward, revealing Parker, his usually impeccable livery askew, his face pale as chalk. "Dr. Shepherd, thank God you're here," Parker said, his voice a taut wire. It's Mr. Ackroyd, in his study, stabbed, sir, dead." Shepherd's breath caught. "Stabbed, are you certain?" Parker nodded, his eyes darting toward the shadowed hallway. "I found him not 20 minutes ago. The door was locked, sir. I had to break it down." Shepherd followed Parker through the grand foyer, where a chandelier cast prismatic glints across polished oak. The air smelled of wax and old money, but beneath it lingered something acrid, metallic, blood. They ascended a staircase, its banister carved with vines that seemed to writhe in the flickering light. At the landing, a crowd had gathered. Flora Ackroyd, Roger's niece, her blonde curls disheveled. Major Hector Blunt, the big game hunter, his jaw set like granite, and Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd, Roger's sister-in-law, clutching a handkerchief as if it might anchor her to sanity. James, Flora cried, rushing forward. Her blue eyes were wide, rimmed with tears. Tell me it's not true. Uncle Roger can't be. Let me see him, Shepherd said, his voice steady, despite the pulse hammering in his ears. He pushed past the group, following Parker to the study door, which hung splintered on its hinges. The lock was shattered, a testament to the butler's desperation. Inside, the study was a tableau of order disrupted. Bookshelves lined the walls, their leather-bound volumes undisturbed. But the desk was a chaos of papers, an inkwell tipped over, its contents pooling like black blood. Roger Ackroyd slumped in his high-backed chair, his head lolled to one side, a silver dagger protruding from his neck. Blood had soaked his shirt front, staining the crisp white to a grotesque crimson. His eyes, once sharp with business acumen, stared blankly at the ceiling. Shepherd knelt beside the body, his fingers brushing Ackroyd's wrist. The skin was cool, the pulse absent. He's been dead perhaps half an hour, he murmured, noting the rigidity setting in. He glanced at the dagger, curious piece, its handle etched with intricate patterns, not unlike something from Blunt's collection of exotic trophies. Who could do this? Flora whispered from the doorway, her voice breaking. Major Blunt stood behind her, his hand hovering protectively near her shoulder, but never quite touching. We mustn't touch anything, Shepherd said, rising. The police will need the scene intact. Parker nodded, wringing his hands. I've sent for Inspector Davis, sir, but there's something else. A phone call just before I found him. A man's voice, not Mr. Ackroyd's, saying he was needed urgently elsewhere. I thought it odd, but then I heard a thud from the study. Shepherd's brow furrowed. A phone call. From whom? I don't know, sir. The line went dead before I could ask. The room seemed to contract, the air thick with suspicion. Shepherd's gaze swept the study, landing on an open window, its curtains fluttering in the night breeze. Beyond, the garden was a sea of shadows, but a faint trail of disturbed earth led from the window to the lawn. Footprints. He stepped closer, careful not to disturb the scene. The prints were deep, suggesting a heavy man, and the tread pattern was distinctive boots, perhaps with a notched sole. Someone came through here, Shepherd said, pointing. An outsider, maybe. Blunt snorted, his voice rough as gravel. Or someone wants us to think so. A killer doesn't leave such an obvious trail unless he's a fool or cleverer than we know. Mrs. Ackroyd let out a sob, her handkerchief, now a crumpled rag. Oh, Roger, who would want him dead? He was a good man, generous to a fault. Flora shot her mother a sharp look. Generous. He was tight-fisted with everyone but himself. You know he was arguing with Ralph again, about money. Flora, Mrs. Ackroyd gasped. How dare you speak ill of him now? Shepherd raised a hand, silencing the brewing argument. Enough. We need facts, not squabbles. Parker, who was in the house tonight. The butler hesitated, his eyes flickering toward the others. Miss Flora, Mrs. Ackroyd, Major Blunt, and myself. Sir, Mr. Raymond, the secretary, left at 6. Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, was in the kitchen. And Mr. Ralph Peyton visited earlier, but he left before dinner. Ralph. Flora's voice trembled. He wouldn't hurt Uncle Roger. They argued. Yes, but it was nothing serious. Blunt's eyes narrowed. Peyton's been in debt for years. Desperate men do desperate things. Shepherd noted the tension in Flora's posture, the way her fingers twisted the hem of her dress. Ralph Peyton, Ackroyd's stepson, was a charming wastrel, known for his gambling habits and frequent rows with his stepfather. Could he have returned, unnoticed? The footprints nagged at Shepherd. Too convenient. To clear. A commotion at the front door interrupted his thoughts. Heavy boots echoed through the foyer, and Inspector Davis strode in, his mustache bristling with authority. He was a stocky man, with a nonsense air that clashed with the manor's opulence. Behind him trailed a constable, notepad in hand. Dr. Shepherd, Davis said, nodding curtly. What's the situation? Shepherd recounted the scene, the locked door, the dagger, the footprints, the mysterious call. Davis listened, his eyes scanning the room. Locked, you say, yet the window's open. Looks like a burglary gone wrong. Or staged to look like one, Shepherd said, echoing Blunt's earlier sentiment. He pointed to the footprints. These are fresh, but they don't match any shoes I've seen in the house. Davis knelt by the window, his fingers brushing the sill. We'll cast these prints. Might tell us something. He turned to the household. Nobody leaves until I've questioned you. Parker, show me the telephone records. As Davis began his inquiries, Shepherd stepped into the hall, needing air. The weight of the scene pressed on him, the blood, the dagger, the locked room. It was a puzzle, and he hated puzzles. His sister, Caroline, would be in her element, spinning theories from the village's gossip. He could almost hear her now, insisting the murderer was a spurned lover or a vengeful creditor. A soft footfall broke his reverie. Flora stood before him, her face pale but resolute. "Dr. Shepherd, you know Ralph. He's reckless, but he's no killer. You'll help prove it, won't you?" "I'll do what I can," Shepherd said, his tone gentle. "But the evidence can lie," she snapped, then softened. "Please, he's all I have." Before Shepherd could respond, a new figure appeared at the end of the hall, a small, fastidious man with a bald head and a moustache so precise it seemed drawn with a ruler. His eyes, bright and piercing, took in the scene with an almost predatory curiosity. He wore a tweed suit, slightly out of place in the grandeur of Fernley Park, and carried a walking stick that tapped rhythmically against the floor. "Good evening," the man said, his voice accented with a faint Belgian lilt. "I am Hercule Poirot, a neighbor, you might say, though not one you know well. I heard of the tragedy and could not stay away. A murder, in such a quiet village. It is most intriguing." Shepherd blinked, caught off guard. "Poirot, the detective, retired." Detective Poirot corrected, his eyes twinkling. "Though retirement, it bores me. My vegetable marrows, they are splendid, but they do not challenge the little grey cells, as a murder does." Flora rushed forward, seizing Poirot's hands. "Mr. Poirot, you must help us. My fiancé, Ralph Peyton, is missing, and they'll think he did this. He didn't, I swear." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice remained firm. "Mademoiselle, calm yourself. Hercule Poirot does not leap to conclusions. I will look, I will listen, and I will find the truth. But first, I must see the scene of this terrible crime." Shepherd led Poirot to the study, where Davis was barking orders at the constable. Poirot's presence seemed to shift the room's atmosphere, as if the air itself bent to his scrutiny. He circled the body, his head tilted, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. He paused at the desk, noting the spilled ink, then moved to the window, studying the footprints with a frown. "Curious," Poirot murmured. "The window is open, yes, but the latch is undamaged, and these footprints, they are deep, too deep for a man fleeing in haste." Davis bristled. "What are you implying, Mr. Poirot?" "Only that we must question what we see," Poirot said, his tone mild but his eyes sharp. "A locked room, a dagger, footprints leading to nowhere. These are pieces of a puzzle, not the puzzle itself." Shepherd watched Poirot, a mix of skepticism and fascination stirring within him. The man's confidence was almost theatrical, yet there was an undeniable intelligence in his gaze. "What do you suggest, then?" Shepherd asked. Poirot turned, his mustache twitching with the hint of a smile. "I suggest, Dr. Shepherd, that you assist me." Chapter 3. Poirot emerges from retirement the morning after Roger Ackroyd's murder. The village of King's Abbot awoke under a shroud of unease. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke, as if the very ground mourned the loss of its most prominent resident, Dr. James Shepherd. His face pale, and his hands unsteady from the previous night's grim discovery, trudged along the cobbled path toward the high street, his mind churned with images of Ackroyd's lifeless body, the dagger gleaming cruelly in the lamplight, and the locked study that seemed to mock every rational explanation. As the village doctor and an unwitting witness to the tragedy, Shepherd felt a peculiar wetter blend of duty and dread settling over him. He had seen death before, but murder, that was a beast of a different stripe. The high street was already abuzz with whispers. Shopkeepers lingered at their doorways, their conversations halting as Shepherd passed. Mrs. Gannett, the postmistress, clutched her shawl and muttered something about cursed wealth to old Mr. Hodge, who nodded sagely while sweeping the stoop of his butcher shop. Caroline Shepherd, James's spinster sister and the village's unofficial herald of gossip, had undoubtedly fanned the flames of speculation by now. Shepherd could almost hear her voice, sharp and relentless, weaving tales of intrigue from the scant facts of Ackroyd's death. He quickened his pace, eager to escape the prying eyes and reach Fernley Park, where Flora Ackroyd had summoned him with a note delivered at dawn. The note was brief, written in Flora's elegant but hurried hand. "Dr. Shepherd, please come to Park at once. We need your help and someone else's. Bring your wits." The cryptic tone puzzled him, but the mention of someone else sparked a flicker of curiosity. Flora, Ackroyd's niece, was not given to dramatics, unlike Caroline. Whatever she needed, it was serious. Shepherd adjusted his coat against the morning chill and turned toward the imposing gates of Fernley Park, its stone pillars looming like silent sentinels. Inside the manor, the atmosphere was stifling. The grand hall, usually aglow with polished oak and crystal chandeliers, felt dim and oppressive, as if the house itself grieved. Flora stood by the fireplace, her blonde curls slightly disheveled, her blue eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. Beside her was Major Hector Blunt, the big game hunter and Ackroyd's friend, his weathered face set in a grim line. The butler, Parker, hovered near the door, his usual composure frayed, his hands twitching as he awaited instructions. Shepherd noted the absence of Mrs. Ackroyd and Ralph Peyton, the missing stepson, whose name was already on every tongue in the village. "Dr. Shepherd, thank you for coming," Flora said, her voice steady but strained. "We're in a terrible mess, and I don't know where to begin." Shepherd offered a reassuring nod, though his own nerves were taut. "Start with what you need from me, Miss Ackroyd. I'm here to help." Flora glanced at Blunt, who gave a curt nod, as if granting permission. She took a deep breath. "It's about Uncle Roger's death. The police are poking about, but they're chasing shadows, Ralph, mostly. I don't believe he did it, Dr. Shepherd. He couldn't have, but we need someone who can see through the fog, someone who can find the truth." Shepherd frowned, sensing the weight of her request. "The police are capable, Miss Ackroyd. Inspector Davis seemed thorough last night." "Thorough, perhaps, but not brilliant," Flora replied, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "We need more than procedure. We need him." "Him?" Shepherd's brow furrowed. "Who do you mean?" Flora hesitated, then gestured toward the garden doors at the far end of the hall. "He's outside. I didn't know if he'd agree, but he's here, and he's willing to listen." Shepherd followed her gaze, puzzled. Through the glass, he glimpsed a figure in the garden, a short, impeccably dressed man with a waxed mustache and a peculiarly egg-shaped head, bending over a row of merrows with an almost reverent focus. The man's black patterned leather shoes gleamed incongruously against the muddy soil, and his green velvet waistcoat seemed better suited to a Parisian salon than a rural vegetable patch. Shepherd blinked, certain he'd misunderstood. "Is that a gardener?" he asked, unable to mask his confusion. Flora's lips twitched into a faint smile. "Not quite. That's Hercule Poirot, the detective. He's retired here, you know, to grow his precious vegetables. But I've asked him to help us, and he's agreed to hear me out." Shepherd's jaw tightened. Hercule Poirot, the name rang. A distant Beltalis of a Belgian sleuth who'd solved impossible cases across Europe. His methods as eccentric as his appearance. Caroline had mentioned him once, mistaking him for a hairdresser due to his fastidious grooming. Shepherd had dismissed the stories as exaggerated, but now, seeing the man fussing over mucks, he felt a mix of skepticism and intrigue. This odd little fellow unraveled the mystery of Ackroyd's locked study. "Come," Flora said, leading the way to the garden. Blunt followed, his heavy boots echoing on the parquet floor, and Shepherd trailed behind, his mind racing. The murder was barely 12 hours old, and already the village was a cauldron of suspicion. Ralph Peyton's absence, the footprints by the window, the missing letter, every detail seemed to point in a dozen directions at once. If Poirot was half the detective Flora believed, perhaps he could make sense of it. The garden was a riot of light summer color, with dahlias and roses nodding in the breeze. Poirot straightened as they approached, brushing soil from his gloved hands with a handkerchief. His dark eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned the trio with an intensity that belied his comical appearance. Shepherd felt a prickle of unease, as if those eyes could peer straight through him. "Mademoiselle Ackroyd," Poirot said, his voice smooth and accented. "You bring me visitors on this fine morning, and you, monsieur, must be Dr. Shepherd, the village physician." Shepherd nodded, caught off guard by the man's precision. "Yes, that's right. And you're Hercule Poirot?" "Precisement," Poirot replied, with a small bow. "Retired, or so I thought, until Mademoiselle here disturbed my marrows with her tale of woe. A murder, she says, in a locked room. Most intriguing, Nan." Flora stepped forward, her hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Poirot, I know you've left all that behind, but Uncle Roger's death, it's not what it seems. The police think Ralph did it, but I know he's innocent. Please, will you help us?" Poirot's mustache twitched, and he tilted his head, studying her. Mademoiselle, the heart pleads, but the mind must decide. Tell me, why do you trust this Ralph Peyton so fiercely? Flora flushed, her eyes darting to Blunt, who remained silent. He's my cousin, practically my brother. He's reckless, yes, but not a killer. And there's something else. Uncle Roger was worried before he died. He mentioned a letter, something about Mrs. Ferrers. I think it's connected. Poirot's gaze sharpened. A letter, you say, and where is this letter now? It's gone, Flora admitted. Vanished from his study. The police found nothing. Poirot turned to Shepherd, his eyes narrowing. And you, Doctor, you were there last night, were you not? You saw the body, the room. Tell me, what did you observe? Shepherd hesitated, the memory of Ackroyd's lifeless form flashing before him. He recounted the scene, the locked door, the dagger in Ackroyd's neck, the open window with its telltale footprints, and the chair oddly out of place. He mentioned the phone call that had summoned him, its voice muffled and strange. Poirot listened without interruption, his fingers steepled, his expression unreadable. Most curious, Poirot murmured when Shepherd finished. A locked room, a missing letter, a telephone call. And this chair, why was it moved, I wonder? The little grey cells, they begin to stir. Blunt, who had been silent, cleared his throat. Look here, Mr. Poirot, I don't know about your cells, but time's wasting. The police are hounding Ralph, and the real killer's out there. Will you take the case or not? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Patience. Major Hercule Poirot does not leap without looking, but the puzzle, it calls to me. A man dies in a locked room, a letter vanishes, a chair moves itself. I will take your case, Mademoiselle but I warn you, I seek the truth, and the truth is not always kind. Flora's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you, Mr. Poirot. What do we do next? Poirot turned to Shepherd, his gaze piercing. You, Doctor, will be my eyes and ears. You know this village, its people, its secrets. You will assist me. Shepherd blinked, caught off guard. I'm no detective, Mr. Poirot. I'm just a doctor. Chapter 4. The Shadow of Suspicion. The village of King's Abbot had always been a place of whispers, where secrets clung to the hedgerows like morning mist. But now, with Roger Ackroyd's lifeless body cooling in the locked study of Fernley Park, those whispers had sharpened into something far more sinister, chorus of suspicion that seemed to curl around every cobblestone and creep through every window pane. I, Dr. James Shepherd, found myself at the heart of it all, not merely as the village physician, but as an unwilling chronicler of this grim affair, my pen scratching out truths and half-truths alike. The air was thick with unease, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching my every step. It was the morning after the murder, and the sun, indifferent to our tragedy, cast a pale glow over the village green. I had barely slept, my mind replaying the moment I'd forced open the study door with Parker, the butler, to find Ackroyd slumped in his chair, a dagger buried in his neck, the locked room, the missing letter, the footprints leading to the open window. It was a puzzle that gnawed at me, though I dared not admit how deeply it unsettled my own carefully guarded secrets. My sister, Caroline, was already at her post by the breakfast table, her eyes gleaming with the fervor of a hound scenting blood. James, she said, her voice a conspiratorial hiss as she buttered her toast. They're saying Ralph Peyton vanished, poof, gone like a ghost. And you know what that means, don't you? He's guilty as sin. Why else would he run? I sipped my tea, striving for nonchalance. Caroline, you mustn't leap to conclusions. Ralph's disappearance could mean anything. Perhaps he's frightened, or he's been taken. Taken, she snorted, crumbs flying. Don't be absurd. That boy's always been trouble deaths up to his ears, and I heard from Mrs. Gannett that he was seen arguing with Roger just last week. Over money, no doubt. And now this letter, business blackmail. James, Mrs. Ferrers killed herself because someone was squeezing her dry, and Roger knew who it was. That's why he's dead. I set my cup down, my fingers steady, despite the jolt her words sent through me. The letter, Ackroyd had mentioned it at dinner, his face drawn as he spoke of a missive from Mrs. Ferrers, naming her blackmailer. It was gone now, vanished from the study, and its absence was a spectre haunting my thoughts. We don't know what was in that letter, Caroline. Let's not weave tales before the facts are clear. She narrowed her eyes, unconvinced. You're too calm about this. James, you were there last night. Didn't you see anything odd? That phone call you got, dragging you back to Fernley Park, what was that about? The question landed like a stone in my stomach. The phone call at 9 o'clock, just as I'd left Fernley Park after dinner. My housekeeper had relayed a message. A patient needed me urgently. I'd returned, only to find no patient waiting, just Ackroyd's corpse. I forced a shrug. A misunderstanding, likely. Someone playing a prank. Caroline's lips pursed, but before she could press further, a knock at the door saved me. It was Flora Ackroyd, pale and drawn, her golden hair tucked hastily under a hat. "Dr. Shepherd," she said, her voice trembling, "I need your help. Uncle's dead, Ralph's gone, and I don't know what to do. But there's someone. Who might? That funny little man next door, Mr. Poirot. He's a detective, isn't he?" I blinked, caught off guard. Hercule Poirot, our eccentric neighbor with the waxed mustache and penchant for vegetable marrows, a detective. I'd taken him for a retired hairdresser, or perhaps a tailor, given his fastidious attire. "Poirot, are you sure, Flora?" "Quite sure," she said, clutching her shawl. "Auntie told me he solved cases in Belgium's dreadful murders. Even. Please, come with me to ask him. I can't face this alone." Reluctantly, I agreed, sensing the threads of this mystery tightening around me. We crossed the Duquesne lawn, to Poirot's cottage, where he greeted us with a bow so theatrical it bordered on parody. "Mademoiselle Ackroyd, Dr. Shepherd," he said, his accent crisp, his green eyes glinting like polished jade. "A tragedy has befallen King's Abbot. N'est-ce pas? Come, sit. Tell Poirot everything." Flora recounted the grim events, Ackroyd's murder, the locked study, Ralph's disappearance, and the missing letter. Poirot listened, his fingers steepled, his head tilted, as if hearing music in her words. I added details sparingly, conscious of his gaze lingering on me whenever I spoke of the phone call or my movements. "And this letter," Poirot said at last, "it named the blackmailer, you say, yet it is gone. Most curious. And the footprints, leading to the window, do they not suggest an outsider?" "Ralph's shoes match them," Flora admitted, her voice breaking. "But he wouldn't kill Uncle Roger. He loved him." Poirot's mustache twitched. "Love, mademoiselle, is a motive as often as it is a bond. But let us not judge yet. The little grey cells, they must work. Dr. Shepherd, you will assist me. You are a man of observation, a doctor who sees what others miss." I nodded, uneasy at being drawn deeper into his orbit. "I'll do what I can, Mr. Poirot." "Bon," he said, rising. "We begin at Fernley Park. The scene of the crime holds secret still." The study at Fernley Park was a mausoleum of mahogany and shadows, its air heavy with the scent of old books and tragedy. The police had come and gone, leaving behind chalk marks and a lingering sense of violation. Ackroyd's body had been removed, but the chair where he'd died remained, its leather stained dark. Poirot moved through the room like a cat, his step silent, his eyes darting from the desk to the fireplace to the open window. "Regard us," he said, pointing to the window's latch. "It is scratched, as if forced, yet the footprints outside, they are too perfect, Nan, as if placed to be found." He knelt, examining the sill, then turned to the chair. "And this chair, Dr. Shepherd, it was moved, you said?" I nodded, recalling the oddity from the night before. "Yes, it was closer to the desk when I first saw the body. Parker noticed it too." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A chair does not move itself. Someone wished to obscure something or to reveal it." He circled the desk, his fingers brushing the polished wood, then paused at a small table in the corner. On it sat a curious device, a dictaphone, its brass horn gleaming faintly in the sunlight. "A dictaphone," I said, feigning surprise. "What's that doing here?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Perhaps Mr. Ackroyd recorded his thoughts, or perhaps someone else did. He lifted the machine, inspecting its wax cylinder. "This is not new. It has been used recently. We shall see what it holds." My pulse quickened, but I kept my tone light. "A clue, perhaps." "Perhaps," Poirot said, setting the dictaphone down. "But first, let us speak with the household. Motives, Dr. Shepherd, are like footprints. They lead us to the truth, but only if we tread carefully." The drawing room was a study in contrasts, Flora's fragile beauty, Mrs. Ackroyd's pinched anxiety, and Major Hector Blunt's gruff discomfort. Parker hovered by the door, his face a mask of professional neutrality, while Geoffrey Raymond, Ackroyd's young secretary, fidgeted with his cufflinks. Poirot stood at the center, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Mies, Amos," he began, "a man is dead, and a letter is missing. This letter, it spoke of black secret worth killing for. Who among you knew of Mr. Ackroyd's fears?" Mrs. Ackroyd, her lace handkerchief fluttering, spoke first. "Roger was upset at dinner. He mentioned the letter, said it was from Mrs. Ferrars. She confessed to something dreadful, and someone was using it against her." "Confessed?" Poirot's eyebrow arched. "To what?" Mrs. Ackroyd hesitated, her eyes darting to Flora. To poisoning her husband. Last year, Roger said she named the person who blackmailed her, but he wouldn't tell me who." A murmur rippled through the room. Blunt cleared his throat, his voice like gravel. "Roger told me something similar. Said he suspected someone close to him. Didn't name names though, damned cagey about it." Poirot turned to Raymond. "And you, monsieur, you were his secretary. Did you see this letter?" Raymond shook his head, his boyish face pale. "No, sir. But I heard him arguing with someone 2 days ago over money, I think. I couldn't make out who it was." "Money," Poirot mused. "A powerful motive. And you, Mademoiselle Flora, your uncle, he trusted you, Nan." Flora's eyes filled with tears. "He did, but he was worried about Ralph, his debts, his future. Uncle Roger said he'd cut him off if he didn't shape up." "Just a doctor." Poirot's eyes twinkled. None. You are observant, methodical, trusted by all. You are, how you say, the perfect companion for Hercule Poirot. Besides, you were there. You saw. That makes you indispensable." Shepherd felt a chill, though he couldn't say why. The idea of working with Poirot was both thrilling and unnerving. "Very well," he said, forcing a smile. "I'll do what I can, Bon." Poirot clapped his hands. "We begin at once. First, I must see this study, this locked room where death came so quietly, and then we shall speak to the household, one by one. The truth, it hides in the details, and Hercule Poirot is a master of details." As they returned to the house, Shepherd lagged behind, his mind racing. Poirot's confidence was infectious, but there was something unsettling about the man's scrutiny, as if he saw more than Shepherd wanted to reveal. The doctor glanced at the garden, where the Marrows stood in neat rows, undisturbed by the chaos within Fernley Park. For a moment, he envied their simplicity. Inside, Poirot moved with purpose, his small frame commanding the room. He questioned Parker first, probing the butler's movements with a relentless precision that made the man squirm. "You heard nothing, Monsieur Parker? No cry, no footsteps, no sound of this mysterious telephone call?" Parker shook his head, his face pale. "Nothing, sir. I was in the pantry. Then I found Dr. Shepherd at the door. That's all." Poirot's moustache twitched. "All you say. We shall see." Next, he turned to Mrs. Ackroyd, who swept into the room in a cloud of lavender perfume, her eyes red from crying or perhaps lack of sleep. "Oh, Mr. Poirot," she wailed, "it's too dreadful. Poor Roger, and now Ralph curse on this house." "A curse, madame." Poirot's tone was polite, but sharp, or perhaps emotive. "Tell me, what did you know of your brother-in-law's fears? His letter, his secrets?" Mrs. Ackroyd faltered, her hands fluttering to her pearls. "Secrets? I don't know what you mean. Roger was worried, yes, but he never told me why. Something about Mrs. Ferrars, I think. She was not a good woman." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Not good, a strong accusation, and yet she is dead. And now, Monsieur Ackroyd, curious, Nan." Shepherd watched the exchange, noting Poirot's knack for unsettling his subjects. Mrs. Ackroyd's vague answers only deepened the mystery, and Shepherd found himself wondering what else she might be hiding. The letter, the blackmail, the footprint clue seemed to lead to another question, and Poirot was clearly in his element, sifting through the chaos with a jeweler's precision. As the morning wore on, Poirot moved through the household, questioning Raymond, the secretary, whose nervous laughter betrayed his unease, and Ursula Bourne, the maid, whose quiet demeanor hid a flicker of defiance. Each conversation revealed a new facet of Fernley Park's tangled web debts, rivalries, unspoken loves. Shepherd took notes, as Poirot requested, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the detective was watching him as closely as the others. By noon, Poirot called a halt, retreating to the study to examine the scene of the crime. Shepherd followed, watching as the little man paced the room, his eyes darting from the locked door to the open window, from the dagger's resting place to the misplaced chair. This room, Poirot murmured. It speaks, if one knows how to listen. The chair, Dr. Y, was it moved? Not for comfort, I think. Shepherd shrugged, his throat dry. Perhaps the killer bumped it in a hurry. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone suggested otherwise. Or perhaps it hides something. A clue, a secret, a lie. We shall find it, you and I. As they left the study, Poirot paused, his hand on the doorframe. Doctor, a word of advice. In a village such as this, everyone watches, everyone talks. But the truth, it is shy, like a bird. We must be patient to catch it. Shepherd nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The phone call, the letter, the cherished detail gnawed at him, and Poirot's piercing gaze only heightened his unease. The detective had agreed to take the case, and already the wheels were turning. The little grey cells at work. For now, the chapter closed with a promise. Poirot was on the hunt, and nothing, not the locked room, nor the missing letter, nor the village's secrets would escape his notice. Poirot nodded, then turned to Parker. And you, monsieur, you heard nothing unusual? No voices, no footsteps? Parker's gaze was steady. Nothing, sir, except I thought I heard Mr. Ackroyd speaking after Dr. Shepherd left, around 9:30, but the door was locked, and I didn't disturb him. I felt a prickle of unease. Ackroyd speaking after I'd left. Impossible, he was dead by then. Unless... I pushed the thought aside, focusing on Poirot's next question. And this phone call to Dr. Shepherd, Poirot said, his eyes locking onto mine. Who made it? You received it at home. Yes, I said, my voice calm despite the sweat on my palms. My housekeeper took the message. A patient, supposedly. But when I arrived, there was no one. Poirot's smile was thin. A patient who does not exist. Most interesting. Someone wished you to return, Dr. Shepherd. Someone who knew your habits. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over us like dust. I forced a laugh. A prank, perhaps. Village boys, you know how they are. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his eyes told a different story. He clapped his hands, breaking the tension. Enough for now. I must listen to this dictaphone. It may speak when the dead cannot. Back at Poirot's cottage, the dictaphone sat on his dining table like an artifact from another world. He wound it carefully, his fingers deft, and pressed the lever. A crackle filled the room, followed by Ackroyd's voice, unmistakable but ghostly. I cannot go on like this. The truth must come out, but I fear the cost. The recording cut off abruptly, replaced by a faint hum. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This was made after his death. The voice, it is too clear, too deliberate. Someone used this machine to create an illusion that Ackroyd was alive when he was not. I swallowed, my throat dry. But why? To confuse the timeline. Precisement, Poirot said. The killer wished us to believe Ackroyd died later than he did. This phone call, this dictaphone, they are threads in a tapestry of deception. And you, Dr. Shepherd, are woven into it. I met his gaze, my heart pounding. I'm just the doctor, Poirot. I found the body, nothing more. He smiled, a smile that chilled me. We shall see, mon ami. We shall see. That evening, I walked the village lanes, the stars above cold and distant. Caroline's words echoed in my mind, mingling with Poirot's probing questions. The dictaphone, the phone call, the moved cherich, was a piece of a puzzle I dared not solve. Ackroyd's death was no simple murder. It was a performance, staged with meticulous care, and one, whether by chance or design, was part of the cast. As I passed the churchyard, a figure emerged from the shadows. Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, her face pale under the moonlight. Dr. Shepherd, she whispered, you were there last night. Did you see anything? About Ralph? I hesitated, sensing a trap. Nothing, Ursula. Why do you ask? Her eyes searched mine, desperate. He's innocent. I know he is. But someone's trying to make him look guilty. Please, if you know anything. I don't, I said, too quickly. Go home, Ursula. Let Poirot handle this. She nodded, but her gaze lingered, as if she saw through me. As she vanished into the dark, I felt the weight of my own secrets pressing down, heavier than ever. Poirot was closing in, his little grey cells spinning a net I might not escape. And yet, I had to keep playing my part, for to falter now would be to lose everything. Chapter 5. The Missing Letter. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dukest lawns of King's Abbot, a village that seemed to hum with secrets beneath its placid surface. I, Dr. James Shepherd, found myself once again in the company of Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective whose piercing grey eyes seemed to see through the very fabric of human deceit. The murder of Roger Ackroyd, stabbed in his locked study at Fernley Park, had set the village abuzz, and Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth was stirring the embers of suspicion. The letter Ackroyd had been reading before his death, a missive hinting at a blackmailer's identity, had vanished, and its absence was a spectre haunting every conversation. As we walked along the cobbled path toward Fernley Park, Poirot's gait was measured, his hands clasped behind his back, his head tilted, as if listening to the whispers of the wind. "Mon ami," he said, his voice a velvet murmur. "This letter, it is the key. It is not merely paper and ink. It is the voice of the dead, crying out for justice. We must find it, or what remains of it." I nodded, though my thoughts were a tangle of unease. The night of Ackroyd's murder replayed in my mind, his agitated demeanor as he read the letter, his cryptic words about a terrible truth, and the sudden summons that had drawn me to Fernley Park, only to find him dead. I had recounted these details to Poirot, but his probing questions made me feel as though I were under a microscope, my every word dissected for hidden meaning. "Dr. Shepherd," Poirot continued, "you were with Monsieur Ackroyd that evening. Tell me again, precisely, what he said about this letter." I hesitated, the weight of his gaze pressing against me. "He was distressed," I began, choosing my words with care. "He said it was from Mrs. Ferrars, written before her death. She confessed to something, a secret she feared would ruin her. Ackroyd mentioned blackmail, but he wouldn't read the letter aloud. He sent me away, saying he needed to think." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his restless mind at work. "And you saw nothing of this letter after?" "No envelope, no scrap, no trace, nothing," I replied, perhaps too quickly. "The study was in disarray when we found him, but the letter was gone." We reached Fernley Park, its imposing facade looming like a silent witness to the crime. Parker, the butler, greeted us at the door, his face a mask of professional decorum, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of nervousness. "Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Shepherd," he said, bowing slightly. "Miss Flora is in the drawing-room. She's been expecting you." The drawing-room was a study in faded grandeur, its heavy drapes filtering the sunlight into a golden haze. Flora Ackroyd sat on a velvet settee, her delicate features drawn with worry. Beside her stood Major Hector Blunt, his rugged face impassive, though his fingers drummed a silent rhythm on the armrest of his chair. Mrs. Ackroyd, Roger's sister-in-law, occupied a corner, her embroidery needle moving with mechanical precision, her eyes darting to us as we entered. "Monsieur Poirot," Flora said, rising, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and dread. "Have you found anything new about Uncle Roger's death? This letter everyone speaks of, do you know what it said?" Poirot raised a hand, a gesture both calming and commanding. "Mademoiselle, the letter is our focus today. It is, how you say, the pivot upon which this tragedy turns. Tell me, did your uncle mention anything to you about its contents?" Flora shook her head, her blonde curls catching the light. "He was so strange that last day. He kept pacing, muttering about betrayal. I thought it was about Ralph, but now, I'm not sure." "Ralph Peyton," Poirot mused, his eyes narrowing. "The stepson who has vanished. Curious, Nan. And you, Major Blunt, you were here that evening. Did you see Monsieur Ackroyd with this letter?" Blunt shifted, his jaw tightening. "I saw him in the study. Yes, he was reading something, looking grim. But I didn't pry. Not my place." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, Major, in a murder, every detail is everyone's place. Madame Ackroyd, perhaps you overheard something." Mrs. Ackroyd's needle paused, her lips pursing. "I'm not one for eavesdropping, Mr. Poirot," she said tartly. "But Roger was upset. He said something about paying for silence. I assumed it was about his finances. He was always generous, perhaps too much so." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Paying for silence. A most interesting phrase. Merci, Madame Depas." As we left the drawing-room, Poirot led me back to the study, a room now infamous for its locked door and bloody secret. The heavy oak desk stood as it had that night, papers neatly stacked, a stark contrast to the chaos of Ackroyd's final moments. Poirot moved with the precision of a dancer, his fingers brushing over the desk, the bookshelves, the fireplace. "The letter was here," he said, almost to himself. "And yet it is not here now. Why take it unless it points directly to the killer?" I watched him, my heart beating a little faster. "Perhaps the murderer destroyed it," I suggested. "Perhaps," Poirot said, but his tone was skeptical. He knelt by the fireplace, his gloved hands sifting through the ashes. "But destruction leaves traces, mon ami, and Hercule Poirot does not overlook traces." The morning passed in a flurry of interviews. Poirot summoned Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, whose dark eyes held a quiet intensity. She stood rigidly, her hands clasped before her. "I saw nothing of a letter, sir," she said, her voice steady but her fingers twitching. "I was in the kitchen most of the evening." "And yet," Poirot said, leaning forward, "you were near the study when Dr. Shepherd arrived, were you not? You opened the door for him." Ursula's cheeks flushed. "Yes, sir, but I didn't go inside. I heard Mr. Ackroyd's voice, though before the doctor came, he sounded angry." "Angry," Poirot repeated, his eyes boring into her. "And with whom, mademoiselle?" "I couldn't say, sir. I didn't linger." Poirot dismissed her with a nod, but his expression suggested he was far from satisfied. Next came Geoffrey Raymond, Ackroyd's young secretary, whose polished manners and quick smile seemed almost too perfect. "The letter," Raymond said, adjusting his cufflinks. "I saw Mr. Ackroyd with it." "Yes. He was reading it when I brought him the Evening Post. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost." "And you did not see it again?" Poirot pressed. "No, sir. I left him alone after that. He asked not to be disturbed." As Raymond left, Poirot turned to me, his voice low. "Dr. Shepherd, everyone speaks of this letter, yet no one saw it after Ackroyd's death. It is a phantom, but a phantom with weight. We must search again." We returned to the study, and Poirot's methodical nature took over. He examined every drawer, every book, every crevice. I stood by the window, the same one left open the night of the murder, its latch still unfolded. The garden beyond was serene, belying the violence it had witnessed. My mind wandered to Caroline, my sister, whose insatiable curiosity had already unearthed half the village's secrets. She'd mentioned a rumor about Ackroyd's finances debts he'd kept hidden. Could the letter have exposed that? "Mon ami," Poirot's voice snapped me back. He was crouched by the fireplace, holding a tiny charred scrap of paper between his fingers. The edges were blackened, but a single word was visible: blackmail. I felt a jolt, as if the room had tilted. "Blackmail," I echoed, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "So it's true then. Someone was extorting Ackroyd." Poirot's eyes met mine, sharp and unyielding. But who? And why? Destroy only part of the letter. "This scrap, it is a message, Dr. Shepherd, a message left for us to find." He rose, pocketing the scrap with care. "We have our clue, but it is a double-edged sword. It points to a truth, but also to a deception. Come, we must speak to the household again. The one who burned this letter is close to close." We left the study. The weight of Poirot's words settled over me like a fog. The letter was more than a clue. It was a challenge, a dare from the killer to unravel their game. And in King's Abbot, where every smile hid a secret, the game was only beginning. Chapter 6. Caroline's web of gossip. The air in King's Abbot carried a crisp bite, as if autumn itself were sharpening its claws. The village, still reeling from Roger Ackroyd's brutal murder, buzzed with a feverish energy, its cobbled lanes alive with whispers that darted like minnows in a stream. I, Dr. James Shepherd, felt the weight of those whispers as I walked home from my morning rounds, my medical bag swinging at my side. The events of the past week, Mrs. Ferrer's suicide, Ackroyd's dagger-pierced body in his locked study, and the elusive Ralph Peyton's disappearance had transformed King's Abbot from a sleepy hamlet into a cauldron of suspicion, and at the heart of it all was my sister, Caroline, whose knack for gossip wove a web tighter than any spider's. I paused at the village square, where the three boars glowed warmly against the grey sky. A group of farmers huddled outside, their breath fogging as they traded theories about Ackroyd's killer. "It's that Peyton lad," one growled, spitting into the gutter. "Always was a bad sort." Another shook his head, muttering about strangers seen near Fernley Park. I kept my expression neutral, nodding as I passed, but their words gnawed at me. Ralph Peyton, Ackroyd's stepson, was still missing, his footprints etched in the mud outside the study window. Yet Hercule Poirot, the peculiar Belgian who'd traded retirement for our village's drama, seemed oddly unconcerned. My encounter with Poirot yesterday had left me rattled. His green eyes, sharp as cut glass, had lingered on me as we discussed Ralph's gold ring. found near the crime scene. A curious trinket, doctor, he'd mused, twirling his mustache. It belongs not to Monsieur Peyton, I think. His words, light as a feather, carried a weight I couldn't shake. I'd volunteered to assist him, partly to keep Caroline's curiosity at bay, partly to stay close to the investigation. But Poirot's questions about the moved chair in Ackroyd's study, the singed letter, my own movements that fateful night felt like probes, testing for cracks in a facade I hadn't realized I wore. Home offered no respite. Caroline was in the parlor, her knitting needles flashing like tiny swords as she interrogated our maid, Annie, about the latest village scuttlebutt. The room smelled of lavender and coal, the fire crackling in its grate. Caroline's auburn grey hair was pinned tightly, her face alight with the thrill of unearthing secrets. At 45, she was the village's unofficial chronicler. Her network of informants, shopkeepers, servants, even the vicar's wife, feeding her a steady stream of half-truths, she spun into gold. "James," she called, spotting me in the doorway, "you're late." Annie was just telling me about Ursula Bourne, that parlour-maid at Fernley Park. Shifty girl, if you ask me. Mrs. Gannett saw her lurking near the post office last week, clutching a letter she wouldn't let anyone see. I sank into an armchair, loosening my tie. "Caroline, you'll turn a grocery list into a conspiracy. Ursula's just a maid, just a maid." Caroline's needles paused, her eyes narrowing. "Don't be dense, James. Annie says Ursula's not what she seems. Came to Fernley Park 6 months ago, no references, and keeps to herself. And Elsie Turner swears she saw her arguing with Ralph Peyton by the lake, the day before Ackroyd was killed." I raised an eyebrow, feigning disinterest, but my pulse quickened. Ursula Bourne, the quiet parlour-maid with the dark eyes, had barely registered during Poirot's initial interviews. Her alibi for the murder night was vague. She'd been polishing silver in the pantry, unnoticed by the other staff. Poirot had noted her nervousness but moved on. Could Caroline's gossip hold a kernel of truth? "Arguing with Ralph," I said, keeping my tone light. "Elsie's prone to exaggeration. Probably saw them chatting about the weather." Caroline snorted. "Chatting? My foot," Elsie said. Ursula looked ready to slap him. "And there's more. Mrs. Gannett heard from the postman that Ursula's been getting letters from London, addressed to a Miss Bourne, not Mrs. Could she be hiding a husband, or worse?" I forced a chuckle, though my mind raced. A secret correspondence, a quarrel with Ralph Ursula was emerging as a puzzle piece I hadn't considered. "You're wasted on knitting, Caroline. You should write novels." She ignored the jibe, leaning forward. "And what about you, James? Skulking about with that foreign detective. What's he found? Don't tell me you're playing Watson too." "He's Sherlock." "Hardly," I said, rising to pour myself a sherry. "Poirot's methodical. He's focused on Ralph's ring and a letter Ackroyd was reading before he died. Nothing concrete yet." Caroline's eyes gleamed. "A letter from Mrs. Ferrars, I'll wager. Everyone knows she was being blackmailed. Maybe Ackroyd knew too much." I froze, the sherry glass halfway to my lips. Caroline's knack for hitting close to the truth was unnerving. Poirot had found a scrap of Mrs. Ferrars' letter, hinting at blackmail, but I'd kept that from Caroline. "You're leaping to conclusions," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Let Poirot do his job." She huffed, resuming her knitting. "I'll find out. James, you can't hide things from me." I retreated to my study, the sherry warming my throat but not my nerves. Caroline's web of gossip was tightening, and I felt like a fly caught in its strands. My role as Poirot's assistant gave me access to the investigation, but it also exposed me to his relentless scrutiny. I opened my notebook, where I'd jotted details of the case: Ackroyd's body, the dagger, the open window, the footprints. My handwriting, usually precise, looked hurried, as if my hand feared what my mind might reveal. A knock at the door startled me. It was Annie, her apron dusted with flour. "Mr. Poirot's here, sir. Says he'd like a word." I sighed, closing the notebook. "Show him in." Hercule Poirot entered with his usual flourish, his straw hat tucked under one arm, his moustache gleaming like polished ebony. His suit, immaculate despite the muddy lanes, spoke of a man who defied disorder. "Dr. Shepherd," he exclaimed, his green eyes twinkling. I interrupt. "Perhaps, but the little grey cells, they demand exercise." "Not at all," I said, gesturing to a chair. "What brings you?" He sat, crossing his legs with precision. "The case, doctor. It grows intriguing. I wish to Discuss the household at Fernley Park, the butler, Parker, the secretary, Raymond, and the parlour-maid, Mademoiselle Bourne. My stomach tightened at Ursula's name, but I kept my face bland. What about them? Poirot leaned forward, his voice low. There is tension, Doctor. A friction among the staff. Parker, he is too smooth. Yes, always watching. Raymond, he smiles, but his eyes are guarded. And Mademoiselle Bourne, she is a shadow, slipping through the cracks of our attention. I nodded, choosing my words carefully. Parker's loyal to Ackroyd. Raymond's young, ambitious. Ursula, she's quiet, but that's hardly a crime. Poirot's moustache twitched. Quiet, yes, but the quiet ones, they hide the loudest secrets. Tell me, Doctor, what do you know of her? I shrugged, recalling Caroline's gossip. Not much. She's been at Fernley Park a few months, keeps to herself. My sister thinks she's hiding something, but Caroline sees intrigue in everything. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Your sister, she is observant. No, perhaps we should listen to her. Web of gossip, as you call it. I laughed, hoping it sounded natural. Caroline's tales are half fancy. You'd waste your time. Time, Doctor, is never wasted on the truth. Poirot rose, pacing the room. I have learned something today. A witness, a gardener at Fernley Park, saw Mademoiselle Bourne near the study window the night of the murder. Not inside, but close. And she carried something. A cloth, perhaps, or a letter. My pulse quickened. A cloth could be anything. Laundry, maybe, perhaps. Poirot stopped, facing me. But there is more. I revisited the crime scene this morning. The footprints by the window, those we thought were Monsieur Peyton's, are not alone. There is a second set, smaller, fainter, leading to the shrubbery. They were missed in the initial search. I stared, my mind scrambling. A second set of footprints. The police had been thorough, or so I'd thought. Whose could they be? Poirot shrugged, but his eyes were sharp. That, Doctor, is the question. They are not Mademoiselle Bourne's. Her shoes are too large. Nor are they Flora Ackroyd's or Mrs. Ackroyd's. A stranger, perhaps, or someone we have overlooked. I swallowed, my throat dry. This changes things. Indeed. Poirot moved to the window, gazing at the garden. The puzzle grows complex. A moved chair, a singed letter, a gold ring, 2 sets of footprints. And you, Doctor, at the heart of it all. I bristled, masking it with a smile. I'm just your assistant, Poirot, hardly at the heart of anything. He turned, his expression unreadable. You are modest, Doctor, but you were there, the night Monsieur Ackroyd died. You heard the phone call, you found the body, you observed. His pause hung in the air, heavy with implication. I met his gaze, my heart thudding. I observe patience, Poirot, not conspiracies. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We shall see. Come, Doctor, let us visit Fernley Park. I wish to speak with Parker and Raymond, and perhaps Mademoiselle Bourne will reveal more than she intends. I followed him out, my notebook tucked under my arm, my thoughts a tangle of dread and curiosity. Poirot's words echoed, you observant. I wondered what he saw when he looked at me. Fernley Park loomed at the village's edge, its red brick facade stern against the gathering clouds. The grounds were quiet, the staff subdued since Ackroyd's death. Parker met us at the door, his face a mask of professional calm, though his eyes flicked nervously to Poirot. Mr. Poirot, Dr. Shepherd, he said, bowing slightly. How may I assist? Poirot's smile was disarming. Monsieur Parker, you are the eyes of Fernley Park. No. Tell me of the night Monsieur Ackroyd died. You heard nothing unusual. Parker hesitated, adjusting his cuffs. Nothing, sir. Served dinner, then retired to the pantry. Mr. Ackroyd was in his study, alone. Poirot's eyebrow lifted. Yet someone entered that room. The window was open, the footprints clear. You saw no one in the grounds. Parker's jaw tightened. No, sir. The house was quiet. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but I knew better. He turned to me. Doctor, fetch Monsieur Raymond, if you please, and ask Mademoiselle Bourne to join us. I nodded, glad for the excuse to move. The house felt oppressive, its corridors lined with portraits that seemed to watch my every step. I found Geoffrey Raymond in the library, his boyish face buried in a ledger. At 28, he was Ackroyd's secretary, his charm tempered by a sharpness that hinted at ambition. Poirot wants you, I said, and Ursula Bourne. Raymond's smile faltered. Ursula, what's she got to do with it? I shrugged. Asked Poirot. He followed me to the servants' quarters, where Ursula was polishing a silver tray. Her dark hair was pinned neatly, her expression guarded. "Dr. Shepherd," she said, her voice soft but steady, "is something wrong?" "Mr. Poirot wishes to see you," I said, noting her hands trembled slightly. "And Mr. Raymond." She set the tray down, smoothing her apron, and followed without a word. In the drawing room, Poirot stood by the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. Parker hovered nearby, his unease palpable. "Monsieur Raymond, Mademoiselle Bourne," Poirot began, his tone genial. "Thank you for joining us. I seek clarity. The night of the murder, where were you both?" Raymond spoke first, his voice smooth. "I was in my room, working on correspondence. I heard nothing until Parker raised the alarm." Poirot nodded, turning to Ursula. "And you, mademoiselle?" Her eyes flicked to the floor. "I was in the pantry, polishing silver." I didn't hear anything." Poirot's gaze softened. "But I sensed a trap. The pantry is near the study." "Yes, yet you heard no voices, no footsteps." Ursula's cheeks flushed. "It was quiet, sir." "Quiet," Poirot echoed, pacing. "Yet someone moved a chair in that study. Someone left footprints, 2 sets, we now know. And someone, perhaps, carried a cloth or a letter near the window." Ursula's hands clenched, but she said nothing. Raymond shifted, his smile strained. "Footprints. You're saying there were 2 intruders?" Poirot shrugged. "Or 1 intruder, and 1 accomplice." "Tell me, Monsieur Raymond, did you ever see Mademoiselle Bourne with Monsieur Peyton?" Raymond blinked, caught off guard. "Ralph, no, not really." They barely spoke. Ursula's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. "That's a lie." She stopped, biting her lip. Poirot pounced. "You what, mademoiselle? Speak." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I saw Ralph that day. He was upset, but we only talked. I swear it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Talked of what?" Ursula hesitated, then shook her head. "It was private." Poirot let the silence stretch, then turned to Parker. "And you, Monsieur Parker, did you see Mademoiselle Bourne near the study?" Parker's face hardened. "I told you, sir. I was in the pantry." "Yet the pantry door creaks," Poirot said softly. "I tested it myself." "You heard nothing." Parker's silence was answer enough. Poirot clapped his hands, breaking the tension. "Enough for now. You may go." As they filed out, I caught Ursula's glance at Raymonda, flicker of fear or anger. Poirot watched them go, his expression thoughtful. "What do you make of it?" I asked, my voice low. He turned, his eyes piercing. "A web, doctor, a web of lies, spun by many hands. Your sister, she spoke of Mademoiselle Bourne's letters. We must find them. And the second footprints. They lead somewhere." "No." I nodded, my mind racing. Ursula's outburst, Parker's evasiveness, Raymond's guarded charm. The household was a nest of secrets, and Caroline's gossip, for once, seemed more than idle talk. That evening, I joined Caroline at the Three Boars, hoping to glean more from her network. The inn was crowded, the air thick with smoke and laughter. Caroline held court at a corner table, surrounded by Mrs. Gannett and the vicar's wife. I ordered a pint and listened as Caroline spun her latest theory. "Ursula Bourne's no maid," she declared, her voice carrying over the din. "I'll bet she's Ralph Peyton's secret sweetheart. Why else would they argue by the lake? And those letters from London, Mrs. Gannett says they're in a fancy hand, not a servant's." Mrs. Gannett nodded, her spectacles glinting. "The postman saw one, clear as day, addressed to Miss Bourne, with a crest on the envelope." I sipped my pint, hiding my interest. A crest that suggested wealth or connections beyond King's Abbot. "You're building castles, Caroline," I said. "Ursula's probably just homesick." Caroline's eyes narrowed. "You're too trusting, James. I'll prove it. Tomorrow, I'm visiting Fernley Park. Mrs. Ackroyd owes me a call, and I'll snoop around." I groaned inwardly. Caroline at Fernley Park was a recipe for chaos. "Leave it to Poirot," I said. "He's handling things." She smirked. "Poirot's clever, but he doesn't know King's Abbot like I do. I'll find what he's missing." Back home, I sat in my study, my notebook open. I added Ursula's outburst, the second footprints, Parker's silence. My narration, meant for Poirot, felt like a confession, each word a step closer to a truth I feared. I glanced at the clock. Midnight. The village slept, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were watching, waiting. A soft tap at the window made me jump. I peered out, seeing nothing but shadows. Yet, as I turned away, a chill ran through me. Poirot's words echoed, "You observant." I wondered, not for the first time, what I had missed. Caroline's web was tightening, and I was caught in its center, a narrator in a story I no longer controlled. Chapter 7. The Parsonage Puzzle. The morning after Roger Ackroyd's murder dawned grey and heavy, as if the sky itself mourned the loss of King's Abbot's wealthiest son. Dr. James Shepherd trudged home through the village, his medical bag swinging at his side, its leather scuffed from the night's grim errands. The events at Fernley Park, the locked study, the silver dagger, the footprints leading nowhere clung to him like damp fog. His mind churned, replaying the scene: Roger's lifeless body, Flora's tearful pleas, and the peculiar Belgian, Hercule Poirot, whose sharp eyes seemed to pierce through the village's veneer of calm. The parsonage, Shepherd's modest home, came into view, its ivy-clad walls a stark contrast to Fernley Park's grandeur. Inside, the air smelled of toast and tea, a comforting routine orchestrated by his sister, Caroline. She was already at the kitchen table, her knitting needles clicking like a metronome, her eyes bright with the kind of curiosity that could unravel a village's secrets before breakfast. "James," Caroline exclaimed, setting her needles aside, "you look like you've seen a ghost. Is it true about Roger Ackroyd, murdered in his own study?" Shepherd sighed, sinking into a chair. "It's true, Caroline. Stabbed, sometime last night. The police are at Fernley now, and that odd neighbor Poiret is poking about." Caroline's eyes widened, her hands clasping together. Poirot, the detective. Oh, I knew he wasn't just a retired gardener. "Tell me everything, James. Was it a robbery? A jealous lover? I heard Ralph Peyton was seen skulking about yesterday." Shepherd poured himself tea, the porcelain cup warm against his palms. "Ralph's missing, and there are footprints by the study window, but Poirot thinks they're a distraction. He's convinced the answer lies within the household." Caroline leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The household. Flora's too sweet, but that Mrs. Ackroyd, she's always been a bit sly about money. And what about that parlourmaid, Ursula Bourne? Annie says she's been acting queer, slipping out at odd hours." Shepherd suppressed a smile. Caroline's network, a web of maids, shopkeepers, and gossipy neighbors, was as reliable as it was relentless. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said, though his mind snagged on Ursula. The parlourmaid had been evasive when questioned her dark eyes darting away like a cornered animal. Before Caroline could press further, a sharp rap sounded at the door. Shepherd opened it to find Hercule Poirot himself, his tweed suit immaculate despite the early hour, his moustache waxed to a precise curl. He carried a small notebook, its pages already filled with neat, angular script. "Dr. Shepherd," Poirot said, bowing slightly, "I hope I do not intrude. I wish to speak with Mademoiselle Caroline, whose reputation for observation precedes her." Caroline beamed, ushering him in. "Mr. Poirot, come, sit. Would you like tea? James has been dreadfully vague about last night." Poirot settled into a chair, his posture rigid yet somehow elegant. "Tea would be delightful, mademoiselle, but I come for information. In a village such as King's Abbot, the truth often hides in the whispers of its people." Shepherd watched, uneasy, as Caroline launched into a litany of village gossip. Ralph Peyton's debts, Mrs. Ackroyd's penchant for expensive hats, Major Blunt's unspoken affection for Flora. Poirot listened, intently, jotting notes, his eyes flicking occasionally to Shepherd. The scrutiny made Shepherd's skin prickle, as if Poirot could see the thoughts he hadn't voiced. "Tell me," Poirot said, turning to Caroline, "this Ursula Bourne, you say she behaves strangely?" Caroline nodded vigorously. "Annie, the grocer's girl, saw her near the woods 2 nights ago, carrying a parcel, and she's been jumpy, always looking over her shoulder. I'd wager she knows something." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Most interesting. And you, Dr. Shepherd, what do you know of this The maid Shepherd hesitated, recalling Ursula's pale face during Poirot's questioning. "She's quiet, efficient, keeps to herself. I don't know her well." "Yet you notice everything, Nan." Poirot's tone was light, but his eyes were sharp. A doctor's eye is trained to see what others miss: the tremor of a hand, the flicker of a lie. Shepherd forced a laugh. "I'm no detective, Poirot. I patch up fevers and sprains, not puzzles." "Yet you are here, in the heart of this puzzle," Poirot said, closing his notebook with a snap. "Come, Let us walk to Fernley Park. I wish to see the study again, and perhaps speak with this Ursula. The walk to Fernley was brisk, the morning mist curling around hedgerows like ghostly fingers. Poirot hummed a tune, his walking stick tapping the ground in rhythm. Shepherd, trailing behind, felt a knot tighten in his chest. Poirot's questions, though polite, had an edge, as if he were testing the ground for cracks. At Fernley Park, the household was in disarray. Flora paced the drawing room, her blonde curls pinned haphazardly, while Major Blunt stood by the fireplace, polishing a hunting knife with unsettling focus. Mrs. Ackroyd sat on a settee, fanning herself despite the cool air, her eyes darting nervously. "Mr. Poirot," Flora exclaimed, rushing forward. "Have you found Ralph? He's not a murderer." "I know it." Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, mademoiselle. The truth reveals itself in time. For now, I wish to speak with Ursula Bourne." Parker, hovering nearby, summoned the mermaid. Ursula appeared, her dark hair pulled tightly back, her apron crisp but her hands trembling slightly. Poirot's gaze softened, but his questions were precise. "Mademoiselle Bourne, you were in the kitchen last night. Did you hear anything unusual?" Ursula's eyes flicked to Shepherd, then back to Poirot. "Nothing out of the ordinary, sir. Just the usual household noises, dishes, footsteps." "And these footsteps?" Poirot pressed. "Where did they come from?" "The hall, I think. I wasn't paying close attention." Her voice was steady, but her fingers twisted the edge of her apron. Poirot nodded, as if satisfied, but Shepherd caught the glint in his eye. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may go." As Ursula retreated, Poirot turned to Shepherd, his voice low. "She is hiding something, that one. But what? And why?" The morning unfolded in a series of interviews, each revealing fractures in the household's facade. Blunt admitted to a late walk in the garden, claiming he saw no one near the study window. Mrs. Ackroyd, flustered, rambled about Roger's generosity, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of resentment. Flora, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated, insisting Ralph's absence was proof of his innocence, not guilt. At noon, Poirot requested a private word with Shepherd in the study. The room was as they'd left it, save for the police tape across the door. Roger's body had been removed, but the blood-stained chair remained, a silent accusation. Poirot paced, his eyes scanning the bookshelves, the desk, the window. "Dr. Shepherd," he said, stopping abruptly, "your account of last night. You said you were at home when Parker called, yet Caroline mentioned you were delayed returning from a patient. Which patient?" Shepherd's mouth went dry. "Old Mrs. Bennet. She had a fainting spell. I was with her until 9. Poirot's head tilted like a bird eyeing a worm. "Curious. Caroline said Mrs. Bennet was in fine health yesterday morning. Perhaps I will speak with her." Shepherd's heart thudded, but he kept his tone even. "She's elderly. These things come on suddenly." "Indeed," Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. "But the timeline, it is everything in a murder. A minute here, a minute there, and the truth shifts like sand." The conversation was interrupted by a shout from the garden. Shepherd and Poirot hurried outside to find Parker pointing at a patch of earth near the study window. The footprints, so clear the night before, had been smudged, as if someone had tried to erase them. "Vandals," Parker exclaimed, "or the killer, covering his tracks." Poirot knelt, his fingers brushing the soil. "Nan, this is no vandal. This is deliberate, but clumsy. Someone wishes us to doubt the footprints' importance." Shepherd's mind raced. The footprints had pointed to an outsider, a convenient explanation. But if they were tampered with, the focus shifted back to the household and to him. He recalled his own movements last night, the phone call, the rush to Fernley. Had he been too quick to dismiss his own role in the narrative? As the day waned, Poirot gathered the household in the drawing room. "Mies Amos," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority. "The murder of Roger Ackroyd is a puzzle with many pieces. The footprints, the locked door, the dagger are clues, but they are not the truth. The truth lies in what is not said, what is hidden in plain sight." Flora's eyes brimmed with tears. "You mean Ralph? He's not hiding anything." Poirot's gaze softened. "I mean everyone, mademoiselle. Everyone has a secret, even the most innocent among us." Shepherd felt a chill, Poirot's words echoing in his mind. The detective's scrutiny was relentless, his questions like needles probing for a vein. As the household dispersed, Poirot lingered, his eyes locking onto Shepherd's. "Dr. Shepherd," he said softly, "your timeline. it does not align. A small matter, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot does not ignore small matters. Chapter 8. Ursula's secret. The late summer sun hung low over King's Abbot, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns of Fernley Park. Inside the manor, the air was heavy with suspicion, as if the very walls whispered secrets. Dr. James Shepherd, his notebook clutched tightly, stood in the drawing-room, watching Hercule Poirot pace before the fireplace. The little Belgian detective's polished shoes clicked rhythmically on the parquet floor, his waxed moustache twitching as he muttered to himself in French. Shepherd felt a familiar unease, a prickling sense that Poirot's sharp eyes saw more than he let on. The murder of Roger Ackroyd, now 3 days past, had turned the village into a cauldron of rumours, and Shepherd, as Poirot's reluctant assistant, found himself caught in its roiling heart. The investigation had taken a feverish turn. The missing letter from Mrs. Ferrers, the dictaphone's eerie deception, and the misplaced chair in Ackroyd's study had woven a tapestry of clues that pointed everywhere and nowhere. Ralph Peyton, Ackroyd's stepson, remained the police's prime suspect, his footprints at the crime scene damning in their clarity. Yet Flora Ackroyd's fierce defense of her cousin had stirred Poirot's curiosity, and now the detective had summoned Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, for a private interview. Shepherd, ever the observer, noted the tension in the household, Mrs. Ackroyd's theatrical tears, Major Blunt's stoic silence, and Parker's nervous fidgeting. But it was Ursula, with her quiet grace and guarded eyes, who intrigued him most. The drawing-room door opened, and Ursula entered, her dark hair neatly pinned, her apron crisp despite the chaos of the past days. She carried herself with a dignity that seemed out of place for a parlour-maid, her movements precise, her gaze steady but wary. Poirot ceased his pacing, his dark eyes locking onto her like a hawk spotting prey. "Mademoiselle Bourne," he began, "Mademoiselle Bourne," he began, his voice smooth and accented. "You are, I think, more than you seem. Sit, si vous plot, and let us speak of truths." Ursula hesitated, then took a seat on the edge of a velvet chair, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Shepherd leaned against the mantel, his pencil poised, ready to record every word. He'd seen Ursula about Fernley Park, always efficient, always reserved, but now, under Poirot's scrutiny, she seemed both fragile and defiant, a paradox that piqued his interest. Poirot tilted his head, his moustache curling slightly. "You were in the house the night Monsieur Ackroyd died. Tell me, what did you see? What did you hear?" Ursula's lips parted, then closed, as if weighing her words. "I was in the servants' hall, sir, until 9 o'clock. I heard nothing unusual. Mr. Ackroyd was in his study, and I went to my room after my duties. Nothing unusual." Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. "A house where murder occurs, mademoiselle, is never usual. You saw no one near the study, no strange sounds, no shadows." Ursula's fingers tightened, her knuckles whitening. "No, sir, I kept to my place." Shepherd scribbled her words, but his eyes lingered on her face. There was a flicker there, a momentary crack in her composure, like a curtain parting to reveal a hidden stage. Poirot too, seemed to sense it. He leaned forward, his voice softening to a near whisper. "Mademoiselle Hercule Poirot does not ask questions without reason. You know something, I think, something you fear to share. Is it about Ralph Peyton?" Ursula's breath caught, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second before she regained control. "Ralph, I don't know what you mean," said. "Oh, but I think you do," Poirot said, his tone almost playful. "The village talks, mademoiselle. They say Ralph Peyton is a scoundrel, a debtor, a runaway. But they also say he has a heart, and perhaps a secret you share, Nan." Shepherd's pencil paused, his pulse quickening. He'd heard Caroline's gossip about Ralph, and Ursula fleeting rumour of stolen glances in the servants' hall, but he'd dismissed it as idle chatter. Now Poirot's words hung in the air like a challenge, and Ursula's silence was deafening. After a long moment, she spoke, her voice low but steady. "You're right, Mr. Poirot. I do know something. Ralph Peyton. He's my husband." The room seemed to still, the confession landing like a stone in a quiet pond. Shepherd's jaw tightened, his mind racing to piece together the implications. Ralph, married, to a it was scandalous, unthinkable in the rigid hierarchy of King's Abbot. Poirot, however, showed no surprise, only a slight nod. as if he'd expected this all along. Your husband, he repeated, savouring the word. And when did this marriage take place, mademoiselle, or, should I say, Madame Pétain? Ursula's cheeks flushed, but she held his gaze. 6 months ago, in London. We kept it secret because Ralph was afraid of his stepfather. Mr. Ackroyd would never have approved, and Ralph needed his support, his money. We planned to tell him soon, but then he was murdered. Poirot finished, his eyes narrowing. And now, your husband is missing, suspected of the crime. Tell me, madame, where is Ralph Pétain now? I don't know, Ursula said, her voice breaking. I swear it, Mr. Poirot. He came to Fernley Park that night, yes, but only to speak to his stepfather. He was desperate, in debt, and Mr. Ackroyd was angry about Mrs. Ferrars. Ralph left before 9, I'm sure of it. He didn't kill him. Shepherd scribbled furiously, his mind whirling. Ursula's story explained Ralph's secrecy, but it raised new questions. If Ralph was at Fernley Park, why had he fled? And what did Ackroyd's anger about Mrs. Ferrars mean? The missing letter loomed large, its contents a shadow over every conversation. Poirot leaned back, his fingers steepled. You are certain, madame, that Ralph left before the murder? The footprints, they are his, Nan. And the dagger, it was taken from the study where he stood. Ursula's eyes flashed with defiance. The footprints proved nothing. Anyone could have worn his boots, and the dagger. Ralph would never touch it. He's not a killer, Mr. Poirot. He's weak, perhaps, but not cruel. Weakness, Poirot mused, can lead to desperate acts. But let us explore another path. You were in the house, madame. Did you see this letter Mr. Ackroyd received, the one from Mrs. Ferrars? Ursula shook her head. No, sir. No, Mr. Ackroyd was upset that evening. He sent for me after dinner, asked me to fetch his brandy from the study. He was reading something, muttering about betrayal. I didn't see the letter, but his face, it was like he'd seen a ghost. Shepherd's pencil froze. Ackroyd, muttering about betrayal. The word echoed in his mind, stirring memories of that fateful night, the phone call, the locked door, the chair out of place. He glanced at Poirot, whose expression remained unreadable, though his eyes gleamed with interest. A ghost, you say, Poirot murmured, or perhaps a truth too heavy to bear. Tell me, madame, what else did you observe that night? The smallest detail, it matters. Ursula hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. There was a sound, not loud, but strange, like a click or a snap, from the study as I passed by. I thought it was the window, perhaps, but it was closed when I looked. Poirot's moustache twitched. A click, you say? Most interesting. And where were you when you heard this sound? In the corridor, near the study door. It was just after 8:30. I didn't think much of it then, but now. Her voice trailed off, her eyes distant. Poirot nodded, as if slotting the detail into an invisible puzzle. Mercy, Madame Pétain, you have been most helpful. But one last question. Why did you not come forward sooner with this marriage? To protect Ralph, or to protect yourself? Ursula's lips trembled, but she straightened, her voice firm. Both, sir. I love Ralph, and I knew how it would look, him married to a servant, him running from the police. But I swear, he's innocent. Find him, Mr. Poirot. Find the truth. Poirot rose, his small frame radiating authority. The truth, madame, is my only pursuit. You may go, but do not leave Fernley Park. We shall speak again. As Ursula left, her footsteps soft but hurried, Shepherd felt a chill. Her confession had shifted the investigation, casting Ralph in a new light, victim or villain. He couldn't tell. Poirot turned to him, his eyes piercing. And you, doctor, what do you make of this? A secret marriage, a missing husband, a click in the night. The plot, it thickens. Nan. Shepherd forced a smile, his throat dry. It's unexpected. If Ursula's telling the truth, Ralph's no murderer, but where is he? Where indeed, Poirot said, his voice low. But I wonder, doctor, if the truth lies not in where Ralph is, but in what he knew. This letter, this betrayal, it is the key, I think. And you were there that night. Tell me again, what did you see? Shepherd recounted his movements, the phone call summoning him to Fernley Park, the locked study, the body. His voice was steady, but his mind raced. Poirot's questions were like needles, probing too close to something he couldn't name. The detective listened, his head tilted, as if hearing music in Shepherd's words. When Shepherd finished, Poirot clapped his hands. Bon, we have work to do. Doctor, this click, Madame Patten heard it, is no window. I think a mechanism, perhaps, a dictaphone, a latch, a trap. We must return to the study, and we must speak to the others. The truth, it hides, but not for long. The rest of the day unfolded in a whirlwind of activity. Poirot, with Shepherd trailing behind, interrogated the household with relentless precision. Mrs. Ackroyd, summoned again, dissolved into hysterics, claiming ignorance of any letter but hinting at her own financial straits. Roger was so stingy, she wailed, always watching every penny. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing, only noting her words in his little black notebook. Major, blunt, gruff and taciturn, admitted to seeing Ralph near Fernley Park days before the murder, arguing with Ackroyd about money. The lad was in over his head, Blunt said, his voice heavy. But murder, I can't see it. Poirot pressed him on the letter, but Blunt shook his head. Ackroyd was rattled. That's all I know. Kept muttering about being fooled. Parker, the butler, grew flustered under Poirot's scrutiny, insisting he'd heard nothing but the usual household noises. Yet when Poirot asked about the study's contents specifically, a small brass box on Ackroyd's desk, Parker's face paled. I don't recall, sir. It's always there, isn't it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic, and Shepherd made a mental note to check the box later. As evening fell, Poirot led Shepherd back to the study, the scene of the crime. The room felt colder now, the air thick with the memory of death. Poirot circled the desk, his fingers brushing the polished wood, pausing at the brass box. He opened it, revealing nothing but papers and a few coins. Empty, yet not empty. He murmured, "Something was here, Doctor. Something taken." Shepherd frowned, peering into the box. Could it be the letter? Perhaps, Poirot said, or perhaps something else. A click, Madame Patten said. A sound that does not belong. We must listen, Doctor, to the silences as well as the sounds. They searched the room, Poirot's eyes darting to every corner of the window, the chair, the dictaphone, now silent on a shelf. Shepherd's heart pounded as he watched the detective, whose methodical precision was both mesmerizing and unnerving. At one point, Poirot knelt by the fireplace, examining the hearthstones. "Curious," he said, pointing to a faint smudge of ash. "Not from a fire, I think. A shoe, perhaps, or a hand." Shepherd's throat tightened. "A clue, a possibility," Poirot replied. "The little grey cells, they work, Doctor, they work." As night descended, Poirot called a halt, his energy undimmed despite the long day. "We have learned much, Doctor," he said, standing in the grand hall. "A marriage, a click, a box, an ash. And yet, the truth remains elusive. But fear not, Hercule Poirot is patient." Shepherd nodded, his mind a tangle of clues and questions. Ursula's confession had resolved one mystery Ralph's secret, but it had opened others. Was Ralph truly innocent, or had his desperation driven him to murder? What was the click Ursula heard, and what did the brass box hide? And why did Poirot's gaze linger on him, as if searching for something unspoken? As they parted, Poirot's voice followed Shepherd into the night. "Tomorrow, Doctor, we dig deeper. The truth, it is like a root hidden, but not forever." Shepherd walked home under a starless sky, the weight of Ursula's secret pressing on him. The village was quiet, but he felt eyes watching, whispers trailing. The murder of Roger Ackroyd was no longer just a crime, it was a labyrinth, and Poirot was leading him deeper with every step. Chapter 9. The blackmailer's trail. The village of King's Abbot had become a crucible of suspicion. Its one-sided gossip now sharpened into accusations that darted like shadows across the green. Roger Ackroyd's murder, in his locked study at Fernley Park, had torn the veil off our sleepy hamlet, revealing secrets that festered beneath its polite surface. I, Dr. James Shepherd, found myself ensnared in this web, my role as the village physician overshadowed by my reluctant part as Hercule Poirot's chronicler and, perhaps, his quarry. Each day brought new questions, and each question seemed to circle closer to truths I dared not face. It was a crisp morning, 4 days after Ackroyd's death, and the air carried the bite of autumn. My sister, Caroline, was in fine form at breakfast, her eyes gleaming over her teacup as she dissected the village's latest theories. "James," she said, her voice a conspiratorial whisper, "they're saying Mrs. Ferrer's suicide wasn't just grief over her husband's death. Blackmail, that's what it was. And Roger knew who was behind it. That's why he's dead. Mark my words." I stirred my porridge, feigning disinterest. Caroline, you've been reading too many novels. Blackmail's a serious accusation. We don't even know what was in that letter Roger mentioned. She leaned forward, undeterred. Oh, but we do. Mrs. Gannett heard from her maid, who heard from Fernley's cook, that Roger was in a state that night. Said the letter from Mrs. Ferrers named someone close to him, someone who'd been bleeding her dry, and now that letter's gone, vanished like Ralph Payton himself. The mention of Ralph Ackroyd's missing stepson sent a familiar pang through me. His disappearance, coupled with the footprints matching his shoes, had made him the village's prime suspect. But Caroline's talk of the letter the one Ackroyd had clutched at dinner, hinting at a blackmailer's identity, stirred a deeper unease. It was gone, stolen from the study, and its absence was a ghost that haunted my every step. Let's not jump to conclusions, I said, my voice steady despite the tightness in my chest. Poirot's on the case. He'll sort it out. Caroline snorted. That little man with the moustache. He's odd, James, but sharp. I saw him poking about the churchyard yesterday, muttering to himself. What's he looking for, I wonder? I didn't answer, for I knew all too well what Poirot was looking for. The truth, and perhaps my part in it. The dictaphone we'd found in Ackroyd's study, a device that had captured his voice, or an imitation of it, after his death, had set Poirot's little grey cells alight. And then there was the phone call, the one that had lured me back to Fernley Park to find Ackroyd's body. Someone had orchestrated that call, and Poirot's gaze had lingered on me too long for comfort, as if summoned by my thoughts. A knock came at the door. It was Flora Ackroyd, her face pale but resolute, her golden hair tucked under a sombre hat. "Dr. Shepherd," she said, her voice low. "Mr. Poirot asked me to fetch you. He's at Fernley Park, questioning Miss Russell. He says it's important." Miss Russell, I raised an eyebrow. The housekeeper, a woman of stern efficiency, had kept to the shadows of this affair. What's she got to do with it? Flora's eyes flickered with unease. I don't know, but Mr. Poirot was very insistent. He said something about the blackmailer's trail leading somewhere unexpected. I grabbed my coat, my mind racing. Poirot's knack for unearthing secrets was unnerving, and I could ill afford to be caught off guard. "Lead the way, Flora," I said, forcing a smile. Fernley Park loomed under a sky heavy with clouds, its grandeur marred by the invisible stain of murder. The drawing room, where Poirot awaited, was a study in tension. Miss Russell stood by the fireplace, her posture rigid, while Poirot sat in a high-backed chair, his hands folded like a judge about to pass sentence. Flora hovered near the door, and I took a seat, my medical bag at my feet, a prop to steady my nerves. "Bonjour, Dr. Shepherd," Poirot said, his green eyes glinting. "You are punctual, as always. Mademoiselle Russell, we were discussing the late Mrs. Ferrers and her unfortunate end." Miss Russell's lips tightened, her grey hair pulled back in a severe bun. "I've told you, Mr. Poirot, I know nothing beyond what everyone knows. Mrs. Ferrers took her own life. A tragedy, but hardly my concern." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign I'd come to recognize as amusement or danger. "And yet, mademoiselle, you were close to Mr. Ackroyd. A housekeeper sees much, hears much. Did he never speak of Mrs. Ferrers' troubles? Of a letter, perhaps, that named her tormentor?" Miss Russell's hands clasped tightly. "Mr. Ackroyd was not one to confide in staff. He mentioned the letter once, in passing, said it was from Mrs. Ferrers and that it upset him, but he didn't share details." I watched her closely, noting the faint tremor in her voice. Was it fear, or something else? Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "And this letter, it spoke of blackmail. Someone who knew Mrs. Ferrers' secret, that she poisoned her husband. Did Mr. Ackroyd ever hint at who this person might be?" Miss Russell's eyes darted to me, then away. "He said only that he suspected someone close, someone he trusted, but he wouldn't say who." The room seemed to contract, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Flora broke the silence, her voice trembling. "Uncle Roger was so careful. He wouldn't have let just anyone near that letter. It must have been someone in the house." Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to me. "Dr. Shepherd, you were with Mr. Ackroyd that evening. Did he seem betrayed? As if this someone close had wounded him deeply?" I felt the weight of his stare, probing for cracks in my facade. "He was agitated," I said carefully. "He mentioned the letter, said it confirmed something he'd feared, but he didn't name names." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And yet, the letter is gone. stolen, perhaps by the same hand that plunged the dagger into his heart. Tell me, Dr. Shepherd, where were you between 9 and 10 that night? The question was a blade, swift and precise. I forced a chuckle, though my mouth was dry. I've told you, Poirot. I left Fernley Park around 9, went home, then got that phone call about a patient. I returned and found him dead. The phone call, Poirot said, his voice silky. A call from a patient who does not exist. Most curious. And during those critical minutes, where were you, exactly? My heart thudded, but I kept my tone even. Walking home, then back again. It's a small village, Poirot, not many places to go. He nodded, but his eyes held a glint of skepticism. We shall verify, mon ami. The truth, it is like a shadow, it moves with the light. After dismissing Miss Russell, Poirot led me back to the study, where the ghost of Ackroyd's death lingered in the air. The room was unchanged, the desk, the stained chair, the open window with its scratched latch. But Poirot's attention was drawn to a small pile of ash in the fireplace, barely noticeable among the charred logs. Regard us, he said, kneeling to inspect it. Paper burned recently, and here, he lifted a fragment, no larger than a postage stamp, its edges, curled black. On it, faint but legible, were numbers. 3792, a code, perhaps, or a fragment of the letter. I peered over his shoulder, my curiosity genuine despite my unease. A code, for what? Poirot's eyes gleamed. That, Dr. Shepherd, is the question. This letter, it named a blackmailer, but perhaps it also named an accomplice, someone who helped weave this net of deception. I swallowed, my mind racing. A code, burned in haste. Had Ackroyd written it? Or someone else, desperate to hide their tracks? Could it be a bank account number? I ventured, hoping to deflect. Blackmailers deal in money, after all. Perhaps, Poirot said, slipping the fragment into a small envelope. But money is not the only currency of betrayal. We must dig deeper. That afternoon, Poirot insisted on a walk through King's Abbot, claiming the village itself held clues. We passed the Three Boars Inn, where Ralph Peyton had last been seen, and paused by the churchyard, where gravestones stood like silent witnesses. Poirot's pace was deliberate, his eyes scanning the ground as if it might whisper secrets. Dr. Shepherd, he said suddenly, you are a man of medicine. You understand the human heart, its strengths, its weaknesses. Tell me, what drives a man to blackmail another? I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. Greed, usually, or desperation. Sometimes, revenge. Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on a patch of disturbed earth near a yew tree. And what of guilt? Mrs. Ferrers, she killed her husband, then herself. But what if her blackmailer was not merely greedy, but cruel? Someone who enjoyed her suffering. I felt a chill, though the sun was warm. That's a dark thought. Poirot, the truth is often dark, he said, crouching to examine the earth. He unearthed a small metal object, a key, its surface tarnished but intact. Most interesting. A key, hidden here, where no one looks. What does it open, I wonder? I stared at the key, my mind racing. A new clue, unexpected and unsettling. Could it be to the study? I asked, though I knew it wasn't. The study's lock was intact. No, Poirot said, pocketing the key. But it unlocks something. Perhaps a secret, perhaps a heart. We shall see. That evening, I dined alone, Caroline having gone to a neighbor's for cards. The silence of my house was oppressive. The ticking of the clock, a reminder of time slipping away. Poirot's questions, the burned fragment, the Keith, they circled in my mind like vultures. The dictaphone, too, haunted me. Its ghostly recording, of Ackroyd's voice, staged to mislead, was a stroke of genius or madness. And the phone call, luring me back to Fernley Park. Someone had known my habits, my routines. Someone close. As I sat by the fire, a knock startled me. It was Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, her face pale under the lamplight. Dr. Shepherd, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something. About Ralph. I gestured her inside, my heart pounding. What about him? She glanced over her shoulder, as if expecting pursuit. He didn't run because he's guilty. He's hiding because he's afraid. He saw something that night, before Mr. Ackroyd died. He won't tell me what, but he's terrified. I leaned forward, my voice low. Saw something where, in the garden, she said, her eyes wide, near the summer house. He was meeting someone, secretly, but he won't say who, and now he's gone. I nodded, my mind racing. Ralph, in the garden, meeting someone. Another piece of the puzzle, but one that didn't fit my carefully constructed narrative. Ursula, you must tell Poirot. If Ralph's innocent, he needs to come forward. She shook her head, tears brimming. He doesn't trust anyone, not even you, Dr. Shepherd, he said. He said you were acting strange that night. The words struck like a blow, but I kept my face neutral. Strange. I was doing my job, Ursula. Tell Ralph to come to Poirot. It's his only chance. She nodded, but her eyes held doubt. As she slipped into the night, I felt the walls closing in. Ralph, the key, the coded fragment each, was a thread in Poirot's net, and I was running out of ways to slip through. The next morning, I found Poirot at Fernley Park, examining the summer house in the garden. The structure was quaint, its walls ivy-clad, but Poirot's interest was in a small lock on its door. He produced the key from the churchyard, and it turned with a click. Voila, he said, stepping inside. The summer house was bare, save for a dusty table and a single chair, but Poirot's eyes were on the floor, where faint scratches suggested something had been dragged. A hiding place, perhaps, or a meeting place. I forced a casual tone. For what? Gardeners storing tools. Poirot's smile was sharp. Or blackmailers storing secrets. Dr. Shepherd, you are too modest, you see, but you do not observe. This summer house, it was used recently, and I suspect it holds the key to our coded fragment. He knelt, running his fingers along the floorboards, and pried one loose. Beneath it was a small tin box, its lid rusted but intact. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded tightly, bearing more numbers, 1486. Below them, in faint ink, was a word, accomplice. I stared, my blood running cold. An accomplice, I said, my voice steady despite the storm within. To the blackmail, or the murder. Poirot's eyes met mine, unblinking. That, mon ami, is what we must discover. The trail of the blackmailer leads here, to this word. Someone helped weave this crime, and they are closer than we think. Chapter 10. The blackmailer's identity. The air in King's Abbot carried a crisp edge, as if the village itself were holding its breath. Autumn leaves skittered across the cobbled streets, their rustling a faint echo of the secrets that seemed to lurk behind every drawn curtain. I, Dr. James Shepherd, found myself once again trailing Hercule Poirot, whose small, precise steps belied the ferocity of his intellect. The murder of Roger Ackroyd, stabbed in his locked study at Fernley Park, had woven a web of suspicion that ensnared us all. The missing letter penned by the late Mrs. Ferrers and hinting at a blackmailer's identity remained the elusive key to unlocking the truth. Poirot's discovery of a charred scrap bearing the word blackmail had only deepened the mystery. And now, as we approached Fernley Park once more, I felt the weight of his scrutiny like a shadow at my back. Mon ami Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate, the letter is the heart of this affair. It is not merely a clue, it is the motive, the spark that ignited this tragedy. Today, we shall uncover who feared its words enough to kill. I nodded, though my throat tightened. My role as Poirot's confidant had grown increasingly uncomfortable, his piercing grey eyes seeming to linger on me a moment too long. I had recounted the night of Ackroyd's murder countless times, his agitation, the letter's contents, my departure from the study, but each retelling felt like a tightrope walk, with waiting for a misstep. Do you think the blackmailer is still among us? I asked, striving for a casual tone. Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign of his restless mind. Oh, oui, Dr. Shepherd. The blackmailer is close perhaps, closer than we imagine. But first, we must hear from those who move in the shadows of Fernley Park. We entered the grand hall of Fernley Park, where Parker, the butler, greeted us with his usual stiff courtesy. His eyes, however, darted nervously, as if he sensed the noose of Poirot's investigation tightening. Monsieur Poirot, Dr. Shepherd, he said, bowing slightly. Miss Ursula is in the morning room, as you requested. The morning room was bathed in soft light, its tall windows overlooking the rose garden. Ursula Bourne, the parlour-maid, stood by a sideboard, arranging a tray of tea with mechanical precision. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, but her eyes sharp and guarded betrayed a storm beneath her calm exterior. Poirot settled into a chair, his posture deceptively relaxed, while I lingered near the door, my notebook in hand. Mademoiselle Bourne, Poirot began, his voice smooth as silk. You have been most reticent about the night of Monsieur Ackroyd's murder. Yet you were near the study, Nan. You heard voices, perhaps saw something you have not shared." Ursula's hands froze on the teapot, her knuckles whitening. "I've told you, sir. I was in the kitchen most of the evening. I opened the door for Dr. Shepherd, but I didn't linger." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unrelenting. "And yet, mademoiselle, your eyes tell a different story. You saw Ralph Peyton that night, did you not? Near the study, perhaps." The room seemed to still. Ursula's lips parted, then closed, her composure fraying like a worn thread. I saw him in the garden earlier," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He was upset, pacing near the terrace. But I didn't see him after that." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "And what was your relationship with Monsieur Peyton?" "A parlour-maid and a gentleman's stepson. Such encounters are not common." Ursula's face flushed, her eyes flashing with defiance. "I don't know what you mean, sir. I barely spoke to him." But Poirot was relentless, his questions like darts, seeking a hidden target. "Come, mademoiselle. The truth is a heavy burden, but it is lighter when shared. You knew Ralph Peyton well, perhaps too well." The air grew thick with tension. Ursula's hands trembled, and she set the teapot down with a clatter. "You're wrong," she said, but her voice cracked, betraying her. I can't say more." Poirot rose, his small frame commanding the room. "You will say more, mademoiselle, because the truth is a tide that cannot be held back. You are married to Ralph Peyton, are you not? A secret marriage, hidden from all, even from Monsieur Ackroyd." I gasped, my notebook nearly slipping from my hands. Ursula's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "How did you?" She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. "It's true," she whispered, tears welling. "We married in secret last spring. Ralph was afraid of his stepfather's disapproval. But someone found out. Someone was blackmailing us." Poirot's eyes gleamed with triumph, though his expression remained grave. "And this blackmailer, mademoiselle, they wrote to Monsieur Ackroyd, revealing your secret. That is why he was so distressed that night." Ursula sank into a chair, her shoulders shaking. "I don't know who it was. Ralph got a letter, too, demanding money to keep quiet. We were terrified. I begged him to tell Mr. Ackroyd, but he refused. And then Mr. Ackroyd was killed." The revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud. I scribbled notes furiously, my mind racing. Ursula's secret marriage explained Ralph's disappearance, but it also cast a new light on the letter. Had Ackroyd's discovery of their union driven someone to murder? Or was there another secret, buried deeper still? Poirot dismissed Ursula with a gentle nod, but his eyes followed her as she fled the room. "A most illuminating conversation," he murmured, turning to me. "But we are not done, mon ami. The letter spoke of blackmail, but there is more. It did not say we must search Monsieur Ackroyd's desk again." We returned to the study, its heavy air thick with the ghosts of that fateful night. The oak desk, polished to a gleam, stood as a silent sentinel, its drawers already searched but yielding nothing. Poirot, however, was undeterred. He knelt beside it, his fingers probing the underside, where a faint seam caught his eye. With a deft movement, he pressed a hidden catch, and a small compartment sprang open. Inside lay a single sheet of paper, folded tightly, its edges yellowed but intact. Poirot unfolded it with care, his breath catching as he read. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, "it is not the letter, but a note, a warning. Listen, Dr. Shepherd." He read aloud, his voice low and deliberate. "Beware the second crime. The truth lies where you least expect it." The words sent a chill through me. "A second crime," I echoed, my voice unsteady. "What does it mean?" Poirot's eyes met mine, sharp and unyielding. "It means, mon ami, that the killer has not finished their work. This note was hidden, not burned, because it was meant to be found by someone. But who, and why?" As we left the study, the note tucked safely in Poirot's pocket, I felt the weight of the mystery deepen. Ursula's confession had cracked open the case, but the note suggested a darker, more intricate game. In King's Abbot, where every truth seemed to conceal another lie, Poirot's pursuit of the blackmailer's identity had only begun. Chapter 11. Secrets in the Study. The late October dusk draped King's Abbot in a shroud of mist, its tendrils curling around the lampposts and seeping into the cracks of the village's ancient cottages. Fernley Park, Roger Ackroyd's grand estate, stood like a sentinel at the edge of the village, its red brick facade glowing faintly under the moon's watchful eye. I, Dr. James Shepherd, walked its gravel drive with a heaviness in my step, my medical bag a familiar weight at my side, though tonight it felt more like an anchor. The murderer of Roger Ackroyd, stabbed in his locked study 10 days prior, had fractured the village's fragile peace, and Hercule Poirot, the enigmatic Belgian detective, was tightening the noose around its secrets. As his reluctant assistant, I was caught in the crosshairs of his relentless scrutiny, my every word and glance weighed by those piercing green eyes. The investigation had taken a feverish turn. Ralph Peyton, Ackroyd's missing stepson, was no longer the sole suspect, thanks to Poirot's dismissal of the footprints outside the study window as a deliberate ruse. A second set of prints, smaller and fainter, had muddied the case, as had the gold ring, the singed letter, and the moved chair in Ackroyd's study, clues that pointed to a cunning killer. My sister, Caroline, with her insatiable appetite for gossip, had spun theories about Ursula Bourne, the parlourmaid, and her mysterious London letters. Yet it was Poirot's latest fixation, the dictaphone found in Ackroyd's study, that had summoned us to Fernley Park tonight for what he called a reconstruction of the crime. I glanced at Poirot as we approached the Manor's oak doors, his straw hat tilted at a jaunty angle, his moustache gleaming like polished obsidian. He moved with the precision of a metronome, his small frame radiating an authority that belied his quaint appearance. "Doctor," he said, his voice a low hum, "tonight we shall see the truth take shape. The study, it holds secrets yet to be unlocked." I nodded, my throat tight. "You think this reenactment will reveal the killer?" Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his smile was cryptic. "It will reveal what was hidden, Doctor. The dictaphone, the chair, the window, these are not mere objects, they are actors in a play, and we shall make them perform." Parker, Ackroyd's butler, greeted us at the door, his face a mask of strained civility. The household was on edge. Ackroyd, Roger's niece, paced the drawing room. Mrs. Ackroyd, his sister-in-law, fanned herself dramatically, and Geoffrey Raymond, the secretary, hovered near the library, his boyish charm fraying. Ursula Bourne, the parlourmaid, was conspicuously absent, her duties confined to the servants' quarters, since Poirot's probing questions had rattled her. "Mr. Poirot, Dr. Shepherd," Parker said, his voice clipped. "The study is as you requested, untouched since the police left." "Excellent, Monsieur Parker," Poirot replied, brushing past him. "Gather the household, if you please. We begin in 10 minutes. I followed Poirot to the study. Its heavy door still splintered from the night we'd forced it open to find Ackroyd's body, the silver dagger buried in his neck. The room was a time capsule of that grim evening, the mahogany desk cluttered with papers, the high-backed chair where Ackroyd had sat, the open window framing a view of the darkened lawn. The dictaphone, a sleek contraption of polished wood and metal, sat on a side table, its presence an accusation. Poirot knelt beside it, his fingers tracing its contours. "A marvelous device, Doctor. It captures the voice, preserves it like a butterfly in amber. But this one, it tells a lie." I frowned, my heart thudding. "A lie? You think it was used to fake Ackroyd's voice?" He nodded, his eyes fixed on the machine. "On the night of the murder, you heard Monsieur Ackroyd speaking?" "Yes. After you left him, you told me you heard his voice through the door, saying he was busy." I swallowed, recalling that moment. I'd left Ackroyd at 9:30 p.m., his study warm with lamplight, his voice gruff as he read a letter. Minutes later, as I lingered in the hall, I'd heard him. Agronor thought I had. "Yes," I said carefully. He sounded normal. Poirot's moustache twitched. Normal, yet dead. The dictaphone, Doctor, was used to play a recording of his voice, creating the illusion he was alive when the killer had already struck. I stared, the implications sinking in. But who could have set it up? It would take planning, access to the study. Precisely. Poirot stood, dusting his hands. Someone in this house, someone clever, and the chair moved from its usual place. Tells us they needed space to work their deception. I glanced at the chair, its carved legs slightly askew from its usual spot by the desk. Poirot had obsessed over it since our first inspection, insisting its position was no accident. "You think the killer moved it to reach the dictaphone, or to hide something else?" Poirot said, his voice soft. "Come, Doctor." The cast assembles. The household gathered in the study, their faces a gallery of unease. Flora, pale and defiant, clutched a handkerchief. Mrs. Ackroyd, her rouge stark against her pallor, fanned herself with theatrical vigor. Raymond stood by the door, his smile strained. Parker lingered near the window, his eyes darting to the lawn. Poirot stood at the desk, the dictaphone at his side, his presence commanding the room like a conductor before an orchestra. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his accent crisp, "we are here to recreate the night of Monsieur Ackroyd's murder. Each of you played a part, knowingly or not. Let us begin with the timeline." He turned to me, his eyes piercing. "Dr. Shepherd, you dined with Monsieur Ackroyd. At 7:30 p.m. you spoke of Mrs. Ferrar's letter." "Yes." I nodded, my mouth dry. "Yes, he was reading it when I left at 9:30. He seemed agitated." Poirot's gaze held mine. "And you heard his voice at 9:50, through the door, yet he was already dead. Let us test this." He pressed a button on the dictaphone, and Ackroyd's voice filled the room, rich and unmistakable. "I'm busy now, Parker. Come back later." The words, recorded days before, sent a shiver through the group. Flora gasped, her handkerchief falling. Mrs. Ackroyd clutched her fan. Raymond's jaw tightened. "You see," Poirot said, stopping the machine. "A simple trick. The killer plays this after the murder, convincing all that Monsieur Ackroyd lives. But who had access to this device?" Parker cleared his throat. "Sir, I checked the study at 9:45. The door was locked, the window open. I heard Mr. Ackroyd, as I told the police." Poirot's eyebrow lifted. "Locked, yet someone entered. The window, perhaps. But the footprints do sets, one large, one small, suggest a plan. And the chair," he moved to it, nudging it back to its original spot. "It was moved to allow the killer to place the dictaphone here, near the desk, hidden from view." Mrs. Ackroyd's voice was shrill. "This is nonsense. Ralph Peyton did it. His footprints, his ring, no." Madame Poirot cut in, his tone sharp. "The ring is not Monsieur Peyton's, and the footprints, they are a lie, planted to mislead. But the second set, those are real, and they lead us to someone else." Flora's eyes widened. "Someone else who—" Poirot ignored her, turning to the window. "Doctor, assist me. We shall reenact the killer's movements." I hesitated, then joined him, my hands clammy. Poirot mimed climbing through the window, his movements deliberate. "The killer enters here, after 9:30. When you leave, Doctor, they stab Monsieur Ackroyd quickly, silently. They set the dictaphone, move the chair to conceal it, and exit. But something is left behind." He knelt, peering under the desk, and produced a small object, a blood-stained glove, its leather worn but unmistakably feminine. The room erupted in gasps. Flora clutched her throat. Mrs. Ackroyd shrieked. Raymond stepped forward, his face pale. "Where did that come from?" he demanded. Poirot held it aloft, his eyes scanning the group. It was hidden, tucked beneath the desk. A woman's glove, stained with blood. Whose, I wonder? Mrs. Ackroyd's fan stilled. "Not mine. I was in my room all night." Flora's voice trembled. "Nor mine. I was with Major Blunt." Poirot's gaze shifted to me, and I felt a chill. "Doctor, you were here when we found the body. Did you see this glove?" I shook my head, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "No, it must have been overlooked." "Overlooked," Poirot echoed, his tone heavy with meaning. "Or placed later, to confuse us. But the blood, it is fresh, not 10 days old. Someone has been careless." The room fell silent, the air thick with suspicion. I glanced at my notebook, tucked in my bag, where I'd recorded every detail of the case, or so I thought. My narration, meant to aid Poirot, felt like a trap, each word a potential betrayal. I hadn't mentioned the glove, hadn't seen it, yet Poirot's eyes suggested he saw more than I admitted. "Enough for tonight," Poirot said, slipping the glove into his pocket. "We have learned much. The dictaphone, the chair, the glove, these are threads in a tapestry. Tomorrow, we weave them together." As the household dispersed, their whispers trailing like smoke, Poirot lingered, his hand on the dictaphone. "Doctor," he said softly, "you are a man of observation, yet you miss things. Why is that?" I forced a smile, my pulse hammering. "I'm a doctor, Poirot, not a detective. I leave the sleuthing to you." He nodded, but his eyes held a glint of steel. "The murderer is among us, Doctor, and they are watching. Be careful what you observe, and what you conceal." I left Fernley Park, the mist swallowing me as I walked home. The glove, the dictaphone, the cherished clue tightened the knot in my chest. Caroline would be waiting, her needles clicking, her questions relentless, and Poirot, with his damnable little grey cells, was closing in. Chapter 12. The narrators masked. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across King's Abbot, bathing the village in a golden haze that did little to dispel the chill in Dr. James Shepherd's bones. For days, the murder of Roger Ackroyd had hung over Fernley Park like a storm cloud, its tendrils of suspicion curling through every conversation, every glance. Shepherd sat at his desk in the parsonage, the weight of his manuscript pressing against his conscience. The pages, meticulously typed, chronicled the case, as he'd seen it, or rather, as he'd chosen to present it. Each word was a brick in the wall he'd built to shield himself, but Hercule Poirot's relentless probing threatened to topple it. The manuscript was nearly complete, a careful tapestry of half-truths and omissions. Shepherd had recounted the locked study, the silver dagger, the footprints that led nowhere, and the dictaphone that had thrown the timeline into chaos. He'd painted himself as the dutiful doctor, the reluctant assistant to Poirot's genius, always a step behind. But now, Poirot had requested the manuscript, insisting it would clarify the fog of this case. Shepherd's fingers trembled as he bound the pages, his mind racing. Had he been too clever, or not clever enough? A knock at the door startled him. Caroline, his sister, poked her head in, her eyes gleaming with her usual hunger for gossip. "James, you look like you've swallowed a lemon. Is that for Mr. Poirot? Oh, I'd love to know what he thinks of your scribbles." Shepherd forced a smile, tucking the manuscript under his arm. "It's just notes, Caroline, nothing exciting. Poirot's expecting me at Fernley." Caroline's knitting needles paused, her gaze sharpening. "You've been jumpy, James, ever since that night, and Mr. Poirot, he watches you like a hawk. What's he after?" "Nothing," Shepherd said, too quickly. "He's just thorough. Now, I'll be late." He hurried out before Caroline could press further, her words echoing in his mind. Poirot's scrutiny had grown sharper with each passing day, his questions like needles probing for a vein. The Belgian had unraveled Ralph Peyton's secret marriage to Ursula Bourne, cleared the stepson of primary suspicion, and exposed the dictaphone as a tool of deception. Each revelation tightened the noose, and Shepherd felt its weight around his own neck. Fernley Park loomed ahead, its Georgian facade as imposing as ever, though the air within crackled with tension. The household had fractured under the strain of the investigation. Flora Ackroyd, pale and defiant, clung to hope for Ralph. Major Hector Blunt brooded by the fireplace, his silences heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd flitted about, her nervous chatter a mask for her fear. Parker, the butler, moved like a ghost, his eyes darting as if expecting the killer to emerge from the shadows. Shepherd found Poirot in the drawing-room, standing by a window that overlooked the garden where the tampered footprints had been found. The detective's tweed suit was immaculate, his mustache a perfect crescent, but his eyes held a storm. He turned as Shepherd entered, his smile polite but devoid of warmth. "Double quotes, Dr. Shepherd," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair. "You have brought the manuscript. We are most eager to read your account of this tragedy." Shepherd handed over the pages, his heart pounding. "It's everything I've observed, Poirot. I hope it helps." Poirot's fingers brushed the manuscript, his gaze never leaving Shepherd's face. "It will help, I am certain. The written word, it reveals much, sometimes more than the writer intends." Shepherd swallowed, his throat dry. "I've been honest, Poirot. I'm no storyteller, just a doctor." "Yet every doctor tells a story," Poirot said, his voice soft but edged. "The story of a patient's symptoms, their secrets. You, Dr. Shepherd, have told a story of murder. But is it the whole story?" Before Shepherd could respond, Flora burst into the room, her face flushed. "Mr. Poirot, have you found anything new? Ralph's still missing, and the police are useless." Poirot raised a hand, his tone soothing. "Mademoiselle, your fiancé's safe, I assure you. His absence is no longer the heart of this puzzle. We must look closer to those who remain." Flora's eyes darted to Shepherd, then back to Poirot. "You mean someone here, but who?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, where Blunt and Mrs. Ackroyd had joined them, drawn by Flora's outburst. "The murderer," he said, "is a master of deception. They hide in plain sight, weaving a tale to mislead us all." Shepherd's stomach churned. He busied himself adjusting his cufflinks, avoiding Poirot's eyes. The detective's words were too pointed to knowing had he slipped somewhere in the manuscript. A detail misaligned, a moment unaccounted for. Poirot set the manuscript aside and paced, his walking stick tapping a steady rhythm. "Let us consider the study once more," he said. "The locked door, the open window, the footprints all suggest an outsider. But the dictaphone, that tells a different story. It was used to create the illusion that Monsieur Ackroyd was alive at 9:30 when he was already dead." Blunt frowned, his voice rough. "You're saying the killer was in the house, setting up that contraption?" "Precisement," Poirot said. "And the chair, do you recall the chair? By the desk, it was moved, ever so slightly, to conceal something. Not the dagger, not the footprints, but something smaller, more personal." Shepard's breath hitched. He remembered the chair, its position slightly askew, when he'd first entered the study. He'd thought nothing of it then, but now pure words sent a jolt through him. The dictaphone, had he touched it, moved it? His mind raced, retracing his steps that night. Mrs. Ackroyd clutched her handkerchief, her voice trembling. But who would do such a thing? Roger had enemies, yes, but to plan so coldly. Cold, yes, Poirot said, his eyes narrowing, but also clever. The killer knew the household, knew its rhythms. They knew how to manipulate time itself. Shepard forced a neutral expression, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "You're close to an answer, then?" he asked, his voice steady, despite the storm within. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Closer, Dr. Shepard, but I require one final piece. Let us walk to the study. I wish to test a theory." The group followed Poirot, a reluctant procession through Fernley's opulent halls. The study was as Shepard remembered it, though the blood-stained chair had been covered with a sheet, a futile gesture to mask the horror. Poirot moved to the desk, his fingers tracing its edge, then paused by the chair. "This chair," he said, "was moved to hide the dictaphone, but not just the dictaphone itself, the case that held it. A small case, easily carried. A case, perhaps, like that of a doctor's bag." Shepard's blood ran cold. He felt every eye in the room turn to him, though he kept his gaze on Poirot. "A doctor's bag," he said, his tone light. "That's a leap, Poirot. Plenty of people carry cases." "Indeed," Poirot said, stepping closer. "But only one person was in this room after the murder, before the police arrived. Only one person had the opportunity to move the chair, to slip the dictaphone into a bag they carry every day." The air thickened, the silence suffocating. Flora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Blunt's jaw tightened, and Mrs. Ackroyd let out a small whimper. Shepard's mind screamed for an escape, a deflection, but Poirot's eyes held him pinned. "Mr. Poirot," Shepard said, his voice calm but strained, "you're mistaken. I found Roger dead, just as Parker did. I've helped you every step of the way." Poirot's mustache twitched, a predator sensing weakness. "Helped we, but also hindered. Your manuscript, Dr. Shepard, is a masterpiece of omission. You tell us much, but not all. You tell us of the footprints, but not why they were smudged. You tell us of the phone call, but not who made it." Shepard's heart pounded, his palms slick with sweat. "I've told you everything I know. Have you?" Poirot's voice was soft, almost gentle. "Then, let us speak alone. You and I. There is a truth we must face." The household dispersed, casting uneasy glances at Shepard. Flora lingered, her eyes pleading, but Blunt guided her away. Alone in the study, Shepard faced Poirot, the room closing in like a trap. "Dr. Shepard," Poirot said, his tone grave, "you are a man of intelligence, of precision, but you have played a dangerous game. The dictaphone, it was in your bag, was it not? You moved the chair to hide it, to buy time. You crafted a narrative to lead us astray." Shepard's laugh was hollow. "You're accusing me, Poirot. I'm no murderer. I'm a doctor, a friend to this village." "A friend, perhaps," Poirot said, "but also a man with secrets. The letter from Mrs. Ferrars, the one Ackroyd read before his death it named. A blackmailer who drove her to her grave. That blackmailer, Dr. Shepard, is you." The words struck like a physical blow. Shepard staggered back, his mind a whirlwind of denial and fear. "That's absurd," he managed. "You have no proof." "Proof?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "The proof is in your story, in the gaps you left. The phone call that summoned you to Fernley, it came from no patient. The timeline you gave, it crumbles under scrutiny. And the dictaphone, mon ami, it was in your bag when you left this room." Shepard's facade cracked, his voice rising. "You're guessing, Poirot. You can't prove any of this." Poirot stepped closer, his voice a whisper. "I do not guess. I see a man who loved his sister, who feared her shame. Confess, Dr. Shepherd, and spare her the pain of your disgrace." The room spun, the walls closing in. Shepherd's hands clenched, his mind grasping for a way out. But Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. The mask he'd worn, the dutiful doctor, the reliable narrator, was slipping, and beneath it lay a truth he could no longer deny. Chapter 13. The unreliable narrator. The village of King's Abbot lay under a pall of grey clouds, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Inside Fernley Park, the grand manor seemed to hold its breath, its corridors silent save for the faint creak of floorboards and the distant ticking of a grandfather clock. Dr. James Shepherd stood in the library, his notebook trembling slightly in his hands, as Hercule Poirot paced before a towering bookshelf, his small frame radiating an intensity that belied his stature. The detective's waxed mustache gleamed in the lamplight, and his dark eyes, sharp as a falcon's, fixed on Shepherd with an unsettling focus. It was the 5th day since Roger Ackroyd's murder, and the investigation had reached a fever pitch. Each clue a missing letter, a dictaphone's deception, a moved chair, a secret marriage tightening the noose around an unseen truth. Shepherd's throat was dry, his pulse a steady drumbeat. He had played his part as Poirot's assistant, dutifully recording every interview, every deduction. But now, as the detective's gaze bore into him, he felt exposed, as if the pages of his notebook might betray him. The household was on edge. Flora Ackroyd, pale and resolute, clung to her belief in Ralph Peyton's innocence. Major Blunt brooded in the billiard room, his silence heavy with unspoken fears. Mrs. Ackroyd flitted about, her hysterics now tinged with calculation. Ursula Bourne, revealed as Ralph's secret wife, had retreated into a stoic silence, her confession a spark that had ignited new questions. And Caroline Shepherd, James's gossip-hungry sister, was no doubt spreading fresh rumors through the village, her voice a relentless tide. Poirot stopped pacing, his hands clasped behind his back. "Dr. Shepherd," he said, his voice low and deliberate, "you have been most helpful, most meticulous. Your notes, they are a marvel of detail, and yet, I find myself troubled. There is how you say, a shadow in your story." Shepherd's grip tightened on his notebook, his smile forced. "A shadow, Mr. Poirot. I've told you everything I saw, everything I heard. I'm no detective, but I've done my best." Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Your best, oui, but perhaps not your all. Let us revisit the night of the murder. Dr. You received a telephone call, you said, summoning you to Fernley Park. A call from whom?" Shepherd swallowed, his mind racing. "From Parker or so. I thought." The voice was muffled, but it said Mr. Ackroyd needed me urgently. "Precisement," Poirot said, his eyes narrowing. "And yet, Parker denies making this call. Curious, Nan. And the timing -8-40. You said, yet the played Mr. Ackroyd's voice at 9, suggesting he was alive. Tell me, Doctor, how do you explain this?" Shepherd's heart thudded, but he kept his voice steady. "A mistake, perhaps. The line was unclear. I assumed it was Parker." Poirot tilted his head, his gaze unrelenting. "Assumed, Doctor, reception are dangerous in a murder investigation. Let us consider another detail. The chair in the study, the one so oddly moved. You described it with such precision, too much precision, I think, for a man who merely glanced at a room. Why did you notice the chair?" Dr. Shepherd felt a bead of sweat trickle down his neck. "It was out of place," he said, his tone clipped. "I'm observant, Mr. Poirot. It's my job as a doctor." "Observant, oui," Poirot murmured, stepping closer. "But observation can be a mask, can it not? You see, Doctor, I have been watching you. Your notes, they are meticulous, yet they omit. You tell of the study, the dagger, the window, but you do not tell of yourself. Where were you, truly, at 9 o'clock?" Shepherd's mouth opened, then closed, his mind scrambling for an answer. "I was at home, waiting for the call. Then I came straight here." Poirot's smile was gone, his voice sharp as a blade. "Straight here, you say, yet the gardener, old Mr. Timmins, saw a figure near Fernley Park at 8:30, a figure, in a coat like yours, and the dictaphone doctorate was removed after the murder, was it not? Who better to move it than the man who knew it was there?" The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with accusation. Shepherd's notebook slipped from his hands, landing with a soft thud on the carpet. "You're mistaken, Mr. Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm no murderer. I'm helping you. For God's sake, helping." "We," Poirot said, his tones softening but his eyes unyielding. "But helping whom, Doctor? The truth, or the lie? Let us speak plainly. I, Hercule Poirot, believe you know more than you say. The telephone call, the chair, the dictaphone, these are not accidents. They are threads, and they lead to you." Shepard's knees weakened, but he forced himself to stand tall. "You're wrong," he said, his voice trembling with defiance. "I've told you the truth. If you don't believe me, ask the others, Flora, Blunt, Parker. They'll confirm my story." Poirot's eyes gleamed, a hunter sensing the chase. "Oh, I shall ask, Doctor, but the truth, it does not need confirmation. It speaks for itself. And it speaks now, in the silences of your tale." The confrontation was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Flora Ackroyd entered, her face pale but composed, her blonde curls pinned tightly as if to anchor her resolve. "Mr. Poirot," she said, her voice urgent, "I've found something. In Uncle Roger's study, behind the bookshelf. You must come at once." Poirot's gaze lingered on Shepherd for a moment longer, then he turned to Flora. "Lead the way, mademoiselle. The truth, it seems, grows impatient." Shepherd followed, his mind a storm of fear and calculation. Flora's discovery was a lifeline, a distraction from Poirot's relentless probing. They crossed the hall to the study, where the air still carried the faint metallic temps of blood. The bookshelf, a towering mahogany structure, stood against one wall, its shelves laden with leather-bound volumes and curios. Flora pointed to a narrow gap behind it, where the wood had been pried loose. "I was looking for Uncle Roger's papers," she explained, her voice trembling. "I thought there might be something about the letter. Then I saw this hidden panel." Poirot knelt, his gloved hands tracing the panel's edge. With a gentle push, it clicked open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a single item, a folded piece of paper, yellowed and creased, bearing Ackroyd's initials. Poirot unfolded it carefully, his eyes scanning the contents. "A list," he murmured, "of names and numbers. Debts, perhaps, or payments. And look, Doctor, your name is here." Shepherd's blood ran cold. He peered over Poirot's shoulder, seeing his own initials, J.S. beside a figure, £200. His mind raced, grasping for an explanation. It must be a medical bill," he stammered. "I treated Ackroyd for gout last month." Poirot's smile was thin. "A medical bill, hidden in a secret compartment. Nan, Dr. Biss is something else. A record, perhaps, of a transaction less honorable." Flora's eyes widened, darting between Poirot and Shepherd. "What does it mean, Mr. Poirot? Is it about the blackmail?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, tucking the paper into his pocket. "But it is too soon to say. Mademoiselle, you have done well. Now, leave us. The doctor and I have much to discuss." Flora hesitated, her gaze lingering on Shepherd with a mix of pity and suspicion. Then she left, her footsteps echoing in the hall. Shepherd felt the walls closing in, Poirot's presence a weight he couldn't shake. "Dr. Poirot said," his voice soft but unyielding, "this list changes everything. You are not merely a witness. I think you are a player in this game. Tell me, what did you know of Mrs. Ferrer's secrets, of Ackroyd's fears?" Shepherd's mind whirled, searching for a way out. "I knew nothing," he said, his voice rising. "I was his doctor, his friend. I didn't know about the letter, the blackmail, any of it." Poirot stepped closer, his eyes boring into Shepherd's. "And yet, you were there, Doctor. You heard the dictaphone, you saw the chair, you received a call that never was. Why, I ask, do your words not align with the facts?" Shepherd's hands clenched, his voice a desperate edge. "You're twisting things, Poirot. I'm not the killer. Look at Ralph, look at Parker, look at anyone else." Poirot's gaze softened, but only slightly. "I look, Doctor, and I see, but I see with the mind, not the heart. The little grey cells, they tell me you hide something, and Hercule Poirot will find it." The confrontation was cut short by a commotion in the hall. Major Blunt burst in, his face flushed, holding a crumpled telegram. "Poirot, Shepherd, you need to see this. It's from Ralph. He's in London, says he's innocent, but he's scared. Says someone's after him." Poirot took the telegram, his eyes scanning the brief message. "In London. Didn't do it. Someone watching me. Help, RP." He folded it carefully, his expression unreadable. "Most interesting," he said. A fugitive speaks, yet he does not come forward. Why, I wonder? Doctor, what do you make of this? Shepherd seized the chance. To deflect, it proves Ralph's alive, at least. Maybe he saw something that night, something that scared him off. Or someone, Poirot said, his voice a whisper. Someone who knows too much. Chapter 14. Apologio. The village of King's Abbot, once a haven of quiet routine, had become a stage for tragedy, its curtains drawn back to reveal a darkness I had helped create. Roger Ackroyd's murder in his locked study at Fernley Park had unraveled the fabric of our small community, and I, Dr. James Shepherd, stood at the center of the storm, not as a mere witness, but as the architect of its chaos. For weeks, I had played my part, chronicling the investigation with a pen that concealed as much as it revealed, my words a shield against the piercing gaze of Hercule Poirot. But now, as autumn's chill settled over the village, the final act, it was upon me, and the truth could no longer be denied. It was a grey morning, the sky heavy with clouds that seemed to mirror the weight in my chest. My sister, Caroline, was at her usual post by the breakfast table, her chatter a relentless hum that grated against my nerves. "James," she said, slicing through a scone, "Poirot's called everyone to Fernley Park this evening. Says he's solved it, the murder, the blackmail, all of it. Do you think he's found Ralph Peyton?" I forced a sip of tea, my hand steady despite the tremor in my soul. Ralph Ackroyd's missing stepson had been the village's scapegoat, his disappearance, and the footprints matching his shoes, a convenient distraction. But I knew the truth, and Poirot's summons felt like a noose tightening. "Perhaps," I said, my voice calm. "Poirot's thorough. If anyone can find Ralph, it's him." Caroline's eyes narrowed, her gossip-honed instincts sensing something amiss. "You've been odd lately, James. Quiet, jumpy. And that phone call, the one that dragged you back to Fernley Park that night, it's never sat right with me. Who was it, really?" The question was a blade, and I parried with a shrug. "A mistake, Caroline, I've told you. A patient who wasn't there." She leaned forward, undeterred. "A patient who doesn't exist, and a letter that's vanished. You were there, James, right after Roger died. If you saw something, you'd tell Poirot, wouldn't you?" "Of course," I lied, rising from the table. "I'm late for my rounds. Don't let your imagination run wild." But as I stepped into the cold morning air, her words clung to me like damp leaves. The phone call, the letter, the dictaphone, each was a thread in the tapestry of my deception, and Poirot was unraveling it with terrifying precision. The coded message found in the summer house, the hidden key, the moved Cheryl pointed to a truth I had hoped to bury. Tonight, at Fernley Park, the curtain would fall, and I feared what lay beyond it. The drawing room at Fernley Park was a tableau of tension, its occupants arranged like chess pieces awaiting Poirot's final move. Flora Ackroyd sat pale and fragile, her engagement to Ralph a distant dream now marred by suspicion. Mrs. Ackroyd, her mother, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Major Hector Blunt, gruff and stoic, stood by the fireplace, while Geoffrey Raymond, the secretary, fidgeted with his tie. Parker, the butler, hovered near the door, his face unreadable, and Ursula Bourne, the parlour maid, sat stiffly, her secret, marriage to Ralph, a fresh wound. I took a seat at the back, my medical bag at my feet, a prop to anchor my crumbling facade. Poirot entered with a flourish, his diminutive frame commanding the room. His moustache was impeccably waxed, his green eyes sharp as cut glass. "Mies Amis," he began, his voice a velvet blade. "Tonight, we end this tragedy. Roger Ackroyd was murdered, his life taken by a dagger in a locked room. A letter, naming a blackmailer, was stolen. A dictaphone spoke his voice after death, and a phone call, false and cunning, lured Dr. Shepherd to the scene. These are not mere clues, they are the work of a mind both brilliant and desperate." The room stirred, eyes flickering between one another. Flora's voice broke the silence. "Mr. Poirot, have you found Ralph? Is he safe?" Poirot's gaze softened, but only briefly. "Monsieur Peyton is not the killer, mademoiselle. He is a victim of circumstance, framed by footprints and suspicion. But he is alive, and I have ensured his safety." A collective gasp followed, but my heart sank. Ralph, safe. That was one less shield for me. Poirot continued, pacing the room. "Let us reconstruct. Mrs. Ferrers, she poisoned her husband and was blackmailed for it. She named her tormentor in a letter to Mr. Ackroyd, who died to keep that secret. The letter was burned, but a fragment remained, a code, 3792, and, in the summer house, another, 1486, with the word accomplice. These are not random. They point to a truth hidden in plain sight. Double quotes. Mrs. Ackroyd's voice trembled. But who would do this? Poirot's eyes swept the room, lingering on me for a heartbeat too long. The blackmailer was someone Mr. Ackroyd trusted, someone close, and the murder, it was no act of passion. It was planned, with a dictaphone to fake a timeline, a chair moved to hide the device, and a phone call to ensure discovery. The killer was in this house, that night, and they are here now. My pulse roared in my ears, but I kept my face neutral, a doctor's mask of concern. Blunt cleared his throat. Get to it, Poirot. Who's the bastard? Poirot's smile was thin. Patience, Major. First, the phone call. It came to Dr. Shepherd's home at 9, claiming a patient needed him, yet no patient existed. The call was made from within Fernley Park, by someone who knew Dr. Shepherd's habits, who needed him to return and find the body. All eyes turned to me, and I felt the weight of their stares. I've explained that, I said, my voice steady. A prank, or a mix-up? No, mon ami, Poirot said softly. It was no prank. It was the killer's design. And you, Dr. Shepherd, were their instrument. The room seemed to tilt, the air thick with accusation. I laughed, a hollow sound. Me, Poirot. I found the body. I've helped you every step. We, he said, his voice cutting through my protest. You have helped, and you have hidden. The dictaphone was in your medical bag, Dr. Shepherd. The chair was moved by your hand, and the letter, its ashes tell a story you cannot escape. Flora gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Dr. Shepherd, but why? I opened my mouth to deny it, but Poirot raised a hand. Let us finish. The code, 3792, was no bank account. It was a date, March 7th, 1922, the day Mrs. Ferrer's husband died, and 1486, January 4th, 1866, the birthdate of a man who knew her secret, a man who blackmailed her, who killed to protect his crime. The truth crashed over me like a wave, and I knew the game was up. Poirot's eyes locked onto mine, unyielding. Dr. Shepherd, you are that man. The room erupted in chaos. Sobs, Mrs. Ackroyd's cries, Blunt's curses, but Poirot's voice cut through like a bell. Silence. Let him speak, if he will. I rose, my legs unsteady, my mind a storm of resignation and defiance. You're clever, Poirot, I said, my voice low. Too clever. But you're right. I'll tell you everything, not for you, but for me. I want it written, clear and true, before the end. They stared, horrified, as I began, my words spilling like blood from a wound. It started with Mrs. Ferrers. I knew she'd poisoned. Her husband saw the signs, the guilt in her eyes. I was her doctor, trusted, close. I needed money. My practice was failing. Caroline's demands endless, so I pressed her, gently at first, then harder. A few pounds here, a few there. She paid to keep her secret. I paused, the memory bitter, but she broke. Wrote that letter to Ackroyd, naming me. I went to Fernley Park that night, after dinner. He was alone, reading it. He confronted me, furious, betrayed. I couldn't let him expose me. The dagger was on his desk, a gift, he'd said, from some foreign friend. I used it. The room was silent now, save for Flora's stifled sobs. The dictaphone was my idea. I continued, my voice steady. I'd seen it in his study, recorded a snippet of his voice days before. Practicing, I played it that night, after he was dead, to make it seem he was alive at 9:30. The chair, I moved it to hide the device from Parker's view. The phone call was a risk, but I needed to be the one to find him, to control the scene. I called my own house, disguised my voice, sent myself back. Poirot nodded, his face unreadable. And the letter? Burned, I said. But I missed a fragment. Sloppy, I know. The code was hers, her way of marking dates that damned me. The summer house note, I didn't know about that. Maybe she hid it, or Ralph, I don't know. Ursula spoke, her voice shaking. Ralph saw you, in the garden, hiding something. That's why he ran. I nodded, weary. He suspected, but he didn't know. I thought I'd covered it all. Poirot stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. You are a doctor, Dr. Shepherd, sworn to save lives. Yet you took one, and nearly destroyed another. Why confess now? I met his gaze, my mask gone. Because you've won, Poirot. And because of Caroline, she's all I have left. I won't let her face the shame of a trial, the village tearing her apart. You know that. He nodded, a flicker of something pity, perhaps in his eyes. I offer you a choice, mon ami. Face justice, or take your own path. Write your account, leave it for us, but do it quickly. That night, alone in my study, I wrote. The words poured out, a confession and an apology, though to whom I wasn't sure. Caroline, perhaps, who'd loved me despite my flaws. Ackroyd, whose trust I'd betrayed. Or myself, for the man I might have been. The dictaphone, the chair, the phone call, they were my tools, my stage. But Poirot had seen through the act. The coded message, the key, Ralph's feral, had led to this. Moment I sealed the letter, my final act as narrator, it would be found with my body. A suicide note to spare Caroline the worst. Morphine, from my medical bag, would be quick. As I prepared the dose, I thought of King's Abbot, its whispers silenced at last. Poirot would leave, the village would heal, and I would be a ghost, remembered only in the margins of his triumph. The next morning, Poirot stood on the village green, his suitcase packed. Flora approached, her face softened by relief. "Mr. Poirot, you've saved Ralph." "Thank you," he bowed, his moustache twitching. "It is my duty, mademoiselle, but the truth, it comes at a cost." As he walked away, the village seemed to exhale, its secrets buried with me. The audiobook's final words would echo my confession, a shocking twist that would linger in listeners' minds, a testament to Poirot's genius and my fall.